Sonny didn't recall falling asleep, but he was woken up by someone banging on the hatch of the Rhino. Sitting up, he looked around and realized that he must have passed out while studying the weave of the Midnight Shard. The austere tack was still laying on the holographic table, glinting as if to mock him. He had almost solved the problem. That elusive element of the weave was almost isolated. But two. As someone banged on the hatch once again, making the massive APC shake a little, Sonny flinched, rubbed his face, and went to the hatch. He opened the hatch and froze, swallowing the rest of his irritated shout as he called out to see who was there.
"Ah, Master Jet, good morning."
She glanced at him with amusement.
"Technically, it's evening. Go wipe the drool off your face and come out. Sonny, we've been summoned to attend a meeting."
He frowned, then threw an angry look at the gloomy shadow, which was hiding in the darkness not too far away. The bastard was supposed to warn him if anything approached, protecting Sonny from a sudden attack or from embarrassing himself. In theory, the shadow shrugged innocently and looked away, shaking his head. Sonny returned inside and quickly washed his face. A couple of minutes later, he left the APC and closed the hatch behind him. Since Soul Reaper mentioned that he had to come out, they were most likely heading for the complex that the local branch of the 1st Army Command used as headquarters. It was only a short distance from the barracks. Indeed, Jet walked in that direction, with Sonny following as he looked around with sleepy eyes. A few moments later, he asked,
What's the meeting about?"
She shrugged.
"We'll find out. All I know is that White Feather wants to see us."
"White Feather."
The two of them made their way to the Army headquarters, but then walked past it, approaching a heavily fortified compound instead. Winter and Dale were already waiting for them near the gates, looking as ragged and fatigued as Sonny. He greeted them.
"I heard you retook Breachsea yesterday. Must have been a tough fight."
Dale simply shrugged.
"Not really. We still hold both sections of the wall above the breach, so all I had to do was persuade the abominations to stay put until the garrison forces shredded them with ranged weapons."
He remained silent for a moment, and then added,
"Things would have been much worse if they were better climbers, though."
Sonny nodded somberly. Together, they entered the compound and were led to a spacious room on one of the underground levels. There, two people were waiting for them. Master Roan was standing in front of a false window, studying the projected image of the night sky. His face was painted ghostly green by the ethereal tapestry of the swirling aurora. Saint Tyrus was motionless, sitting in an imposing chair with her back held straight. Sonny hadn't seen Sky Tide in a while, at least in her human form. She looked battered. Her elegant armor was bent and broken, white steel marred by dried blood. Her hair, which had once fallen down like a cascade of pale gold, now looked lifeless and bleak. Her dazzlingly beautiful face was pale, blackened by ugly bruises. It seemed that holding the winter beast back was taking a toll on the transcendent of the White Feather clan. Her expression was still aloof and stern, however, and her amber eyes burned with the same fierce, cold resolve. Master Roan turned at the sound of the steps.
"Ascended Jet, Ascended Winter, Ascended Dale, Sunless, welcome. Sorry for the sudden invitation."
Sonny noticed black circles under the handsome man's eyes. Roan was acting uncharacteristically subdued. His usual charisma gone. That didn't bode well. Master Jet waved a hand.
"War waits for no one. What did you want to discuss?"
Roan smiled slightly.
"Straight to business. Well, it's for the best, and there's not much time to prepare."
He walked away from the false window and stopped beside Sky Tide, then gestured at the holographic projection in front of them. On it, the map of the surrounding area disappeared, replaced by the blurry image of a grotesque creature. Leathery wings, lean body with 6 segmented legs, a tail that ended with a long, jagged stinger, and 3 long necks, each ending in a harrowing circular maw. The abominations looked like a mix between a wyvern, a worm, and a scorpion. It was large, formidable, and utterly hideous.
"Our scouts have confirmed that the devouring cloud has produced a new tyrant, a fallen one, but still a dire threat to the survival of the city. The creature mostly hides within the swarm, controlling it from behind."
Winter cursed.
Yeah, we figured as much after the last time.
Master Roan slowly nodded.
It's our priority to eliminate the Tyrant. The devouring cloud will descend on Falcon Scott today. Yow'll be the blade to strike its puppeteer down.
The Irregulars glanced at each other. After a short pause, Jet asked,
How do you know that? How do you know that the swarm will come?
Roan scowled slightly, but before he could answer, Saint Tyrus suddenly spoke.
Because our clan will lure it here.
The four ascended grew silent, looking at her incredulously. Sky Tide met their gazes with a calm expression, her face as motionless as ever. Somewhat stunned by that confession, Sunny asked,
Why the hell would you do that?
Sky Tide inhaled deeply, then turned away.
Goliath draws near. We have to eradicate other threats before he comes. If they attack together, you can imagine the devastation. The window of opportunity grows narrower with each day, so we can't passively wait for the devouring cloud to return anymore. So, Roan and other awakened warriors of my clan will lure it here, today.
She glanced at the Irregulars, studied them for a few moments, and added,
Ascended Winter will contain the swarm, Roan will bring the Tyrant down. The three of y'all make sure that the creature never takes flight again. That's the battle plan.
Sunny smiled darkly.
What if Winter fails to hold back the swarm? What if Roan fails to isolate the Tyrant? What if the three of us fail to kill it in time?
Saint Tyrus gazed at him for a while, her amber eyes both beautiful and cold. Then, she uttered simply,
Don't fail.
Master Jet laughed. Shaking her head, she patted Sunny on the shoulder and walked toward the projection of the fallen Tyrant.
All right, I like that plan. Let's discuss the details.
The discussion didn't take long. Soon, the Irregulars uttered their goodbyes to Sky Tide and headed to the exit, each in a hurry to prepare for the coming battle. Sunny, however, stayed back after a bit of hesitation. When there were only three of them left in the room, Sky Tide, Roan, and him, Sunny peeked at the battered Transcendent with a complicated expression. After a few moments, he said,
You must have heard that another of Valor's saints was killed.
Saint Tyrus gaped at him silently, not saying anything. Sunny tilted his head a little.
You and I've helped that monster escape from the Night Temple. If it weren't for you, I would have been dead, and Mordred would have still been contained. Do you regret saving me now that he's out there, slaughtering people?
Sky Tide remained motionless for a bit, then shook her head.
No.
A pale smile appeared on Sunny's face. She sighed after Sunny asked why.
Years ago, when the young Prince of War came to the Chained Isles, I offered him my hospitality. Like any other awakened, he was under my protection, roaming the dream realm in search of something, much like you did when Valor plotted to ambush and eliminate him. I followed orders and did nothing to prevent it. I've carried the shame of that wrongdoing ever since.
He pondered her words for a few moments.
They had a very good reason to get rid of him, though that guy is like a nightmare creature. There's not much human left in him.
Saint Tyrus gazed him in the eye, her beautiful face expressionless.
Is it worth it to do the wrong thing for the right reason? No, life is unpredictable, and the future is unclear. All we can strive for is to act according to our principles, and do what we consider right. The rest doesn't matter.
Sunny gazed around, his gaze lingering on the traces of dried blood on Sky Tide's armor. His eyes turned dark.
Doing the right thing is what got you and your clan banished to this hellhole.
She gazed at the false window, where the image of the night sky was projected. A full moon was shining on its velvet expanse, surrounded by the lights of the ghostly aurora. A hint of some deep, hidden emotion appeared on Sky Tide's beautiful face. After a while, she said,
The sky is suffocating here, but other than that, this is precisely where I wanted to be.
Sunny lingered for a few moments, then bowed slightly to Master Roan and silently strode away. He had to prepare for battle. Sky Tide's wisdom lingers as Sunny readies himself for battle. Please hit like on this episode to help more people find the story. Then let's return to what lies ahead. Standing on the battlement and peering into the cold darkness beyond, Sunny had a contemplative expression on his face. The wind smelled of snow as it played with his black hair, which had grown a bit too long by now. Pale moonlight permeated the air, failing to reach the ravaged land. Winter and Dale were sitting nearby, leaning on alloy parapet of the wall and sharing a flask. The two captains seemed calm, one in her usual relaxed manner, the other solemn and staid. As the contents of the flask ran out, Winter sighed and looked at Sunny. He lingered for a moment, then shrugged as Winter remarked that he seemed terribly serious today. She didn't press, content to rest with her eyes hidden behind the cracked sunglasses after Sunny admitted he was just thinking about stuff. Sunny felt strangely thoughtful after his conversation with Saint Tyrus. He wasn't sure that he agreed with her uncompromising views. But there was one thing Sky Tide had said that was unquestionably true. Life was, indeed, unpredictable. Take his own relationship with the Steely Saint. Sunny didn't know Saint Tyrus very well, or share any of her principles, but he found himself respecting the stern transcendent a great deal. He liked Master Roan, too. The three of them even shared some history. Several years ago, Sunny had held nothing but contempt toward legacies. He had regarded them as arrogant, dangerous, and hateful people, someone who didn't deserve the unfair privileges bestowed upon them by nothing except for birthright. Who would have thought that he would come to value and admire some of them one day? Take Cassie, too. When she surrendered his secret to Nephi's on the Forgotten Shore, Sunny had thought that it was the darkest moment of his life, and yet, if she hadn't made that choice, he would have stayed behind a sleeper. Sunny had no way of knowing if he would have survived the same journey-changing Star had. What he did know, though, was that Rain would have been dead if not for his return, if Sunny hadn't been there to hold back the tide of nightmare creature advancing on her school. His sister would have been ripped apart by the rampaging abominations. There were too many instances like that to count. Life was unpredictable, and no one could predict the twists and turns of fate, except for Weaver, perhaps. Even oracles like Cassie could only see glimpses of it, blind to the context and powerless to change the outcome. So where did it leave him?
The same place where I started, I guess.
An ignorant fool struggling against something he couldn't even comprehend. Antarctica, at least, was terribly straightforward. With a sigh, Sunny moved strands of hair away from his eyes and sat down near Winter and Dale. His hands were aching for a simple fight.
How much more do we have to wait? Damn it.
Dale peeked at him with a smile so faint that it was almost non-existent.
Rest while you can. You'll be regretting that this calm didn't last longer very soon.
Sunny grimaced and looked away, staring at a squad of soldiers that marched by. The soldiers were acting a bit strange, sticking painstakingly to the better illuminated parts of the battlement and hastening their steps in the darker areas. Their faces were glum and nervous. He frowned. Winter turned her head slightly, studying the soldiers as Sunny frowned and asked what was up with them. Sunny thought for a moment, then shook his head after Winter asked if he had heard the rumors. The ascended archer chuckled when Sunny asked what rumors she meant.
You should really come out of your APC more often, you know? Well, anyway, there are a lot of scary stories spreading among the refugees these days, one more nonsensical than the other. The latest story is that there's a shadow wraith stalking the city, hiding somewhere in the darkness. Apparently, it lures people away from light, never to be seen again.
She took a deep breath and then added in a more somber tone, although maybe there's some truth to that one. Soldiers aren't usually easily spooked, but as you can see, they're on edge. Too many disappearances lately. Sunny frowned. In a city of 200 million, there were bound to be some disappearances, especially with the nightmare spell infecting people left and right. However, he felt concerned. A shadow wraith. That was right up his alley, no. There could also be a different explanation for the increased number of disappearances. The terror of 1049 was known to start its meals in just that manner. In any case, he sensed some unease.
A shadow creature, I don't know, they're extremely rare. I only ever met one in the wild, and even that was inside a nightmare. I am not sure if any survived to this day.
Well, there was that one little bastard who got a chunk of his flesh. Did scavengers need to devour a corpse to inherit new abilities, or would any piece of flesh suffice? What were the chances of the vile gremlin developing an affinity to shadows? Dale simply shrugged.
If there's something strange going on, Army Command should already be investigating, since we weren't officially informed. Either the rumors are baseless, or the incidents aren't serious enough to inform the Irregulars. Regardless, we should concentrate on the task at hand.
As if on cue, there was the sound of light steps, and Master Jet approached from further along the wall. The members of her cohort, now fewer than before, followed. She looked around briefly, then said,
I've just received the word. Roan and his people are approaching. The devouring cloud is in a frenzy. Don't know what they did, but it worked. Prepare yourself.
The rest of the defending force seemed to have got the same news. All along the southern stretch of the wall, a flurry of activity commenced. Soldiers were checking their weapons for the last time. Awakened were summoning their memories. Railgun crews were hurriedly finishing maintenance procedures and hauling crates of tungsten rounds closer to the feeding mechanisms. Thousands of turrets came alive, turning their twin barrels toward the sky. Sunny rose and stretched. Breathing in the cold winter air, looking at the members of his cohort, he grinned.
Same arrangement as the last time. Hopefully, actually, never mind. I am not saying it aloud. Just do well and don't die.
Pretty soon, the distant horizon turned hazy with a myriad of flying horrors. The scene was eerily familiar. The only difference from their last attempt to destroy the devouring cloud was that, today, the landscape was illuminated by pale moonlight, and that there were a few less irregulars standing watch on the wall. Sunny silently observed Winter, who was preparing to unleash hell once again. She was surrounded by several mysterious memories. And once again, a cohort of Awakened used their aspects to augment her powers. He stood several distance away in the company of Master Jet and Dale. None of the three were going to participate in the ranged barrage, conserving their potency for the sortie to hunt down and kill the Tyrant. The atmosphere was tense, but not as oppressive as the first battle against the harrowing swarm. On the alloy battlement in front of them, a man in leather armor was sitting with his eyes closed. Meditating, the falling snowflakes swirled in strange ways around him, as if following invisible paths. He was one of Dale's Awakened, and someone of whom Sunny knew. The man possessed the ability to open stable spatial rifts, and had been one of the candidates he had considered when assembling the cohort, since no one knew where the Tyrant was going to fall after having its wings cut by Roan. The strike team would need to get around the perimeter of the wall fast. If Roan succeeded, hearing Dale's quiet whisper, Sunny observed south and saw arcs of thunderbolt dancing deep within the distant swarm. His face paled a little as Dale cursed the gods. It seemed that Roan and the Awakened of the White Feather clan were leading the devouring cloud to the city with the smell of their own blood after Dale whispered in horror that they were inside it. Suddenly, the task of slaying the Tyrant of the swarm seemed even heavier than before.
So what? Nothing changed.
Sunny had some contingencies, at least. Saint and Nightmare were currently guarding one of the breaches in the wall should the three masters prove inadequate. His shadows would help them reach and kill the broodmother of the swarm, or was it a father?
Who cares?
Sunny clenched his fists and watched as the horde of flying horrors swiftly drew closer to Falcon Scott. Soon, the city defense systems opened fire once again, and so did Winter. The mass of brood beasts obscured the sky, drowning out the light of the moon. In front of the swarm, a horde of nightmare creatures moved, seemingly as desperate to escape from it as humans would be, caught between the devouring cloud and the wall of Falcon Scott. They launched themselves at the alloy barrier, dying in scores under the barrage of bullets and arrows. Somehow, today's battle felt more frenzied, more dire. Shrieks and howls of abominations fused with human shouts, all disappearing into the rustle of countless leathery wings. A dark expression appeared on Soul Reaper's face. Gripping her glaive, she said,
Hold, wait for the signal.
At the moment, everything depended on Roan and his Awakened. They had to lure the Tyrant forward and bring it to the ground, so that the three elite Ascended of the Irregular company could sortie out, find it, and finish the creature off once and for all before it escaped. Seconds passed, then minutes, but the promised indication wasn't coming. Sunny felt his nerves reaching a breaking point when a swift shadow suddenly fell from the sky. It wasn't a brood beast, However, instead, it was a young awakened woman wearing the white colors of her clan, her armor decorated with beautiful etchings of hawk feathers, and marred with blood. Sunny remembered seeing her several times in the sanctuary, back when Sky Tide had still ruled over the Chained Isles. The young woman landed gracelessly on the battlement and staggered, barely keeping her balance. Then, she observed around, took a step toward Master Jet, and stumbled. Dale caught and supported her. His face grim. Soul Reaper frowned.
What happened to sending us a signal? Where's the Tyrant?
The young woman gritted her teeth and then said hoarsely, her voice full of ire, that there were two of them. It took a few seconds for her words to register. Sunny cursed and observed at the dark mass of the swarm that obscured the sky.
Two tyrants, how does it make any sense?
Jet's face twitched. She stared at the young woman for a moment, then asked evenly where they were. The legacy leaned on Dale and turned slightly to face the devouring cloud.
The rare signal.
As if answering her words, two radiant spheres of light suddenly appeared in the distance, tearing through the darkness. One deep within the swarm, across the killing field, the other, unexpectedly, was even further away, but in a different direction, to the west of the city, near the ocean. The devouring cloud had barely reached there. Her job done, the young woman from the white feather let out a sigh and slumped. Losing consciousness, Dale barked something. And one of his men, most likely the healer, took her off his hands. The three masters briefly glanced at each other. Master Jet uttered a swear that would have made Sunny blush if the situation was slightly less dire, and then smiled darkly.
I guess we are going to have to split up.
She observed between the distant spheres of light, then sighed and moved her shoulders, as if to loosen the muscles.
I'll take the southern one, Sunny, Night. You two go west and deal with the second Tyrant. Get it done.
Sunny blinked a couple of times, then took a step forward.
But
She raised a hand, stopping him.
That's an order, in no time to waste.
With that, Jet began summoning a memory. Before the whirlwind of white sparks even manifested into reality, Soul Reaper was already moving, leaping over the parapet of the battlement to disappear into the haze of falling snow below. Sunny gritted his teeth. When he turned around, there was a shimmering portal in the air in front of him, leading to the point on the western wall not too distant from where the sphere of light still burned in the air. Dale was already heading toward it, his helmet weaving itself from light. Sunny followed, before stepping into the spatial rift. However, he sent a mental command to Saint, not a few seconds after Soul Reaper landed on the ravaged ground beyond of the killing field. A dark rider leaped through the breach in the wall and followed. Stepping through the spatial rift experienced no different from taking a mundane step. It was only a little bit disorienting, the sudden change of the landscape, the direction of the wind, the subtle shift in the tone of the firing armaments. For Sunny, it was especially so, because he could also feel that the shadows around him were entirely different. However, there was no time to waste on being confused, forcing himself to focus. He followed Dale to the edge of the wall and peered down. Far below, there was a stretch of land flooded by attacking abominations, with brood beasts swarming above them. And behind those, the edge of a tall cliff that descended toward the shore. The dark expanse of the ocean stretched for as far as the eye could see, moonlight dancing on its restless, black surface. The sphere of light was slowly growing dimmer as it burned somewhere above and beyond the cliff. Dale spoke, his voice sounding slightly muffled by the helmet.
We will have to fight our way through.
Sunny nodded.
I'll clear the way, you follow.
The sin of solace was already manifesting itself into his hand, and shadows were wrapped around his body, filling him with resilience and strength. The marble shell was augmented. As well, Sunny lingered for a moment.
What about when we reach the Tyrant? We can't allow it to escape, and with Master Jet gone.
The stalwart master shook his head.
I'll trap it and us within the barrier. Then, either the Tyrant dies or we do. No one will escape.
Sunny had already seen one of Dale's barriers, the one that allowed things to pass from within, but blocked everything coming from the outside. Today, he would see the second one, which functioned in reverse. More than that, he was going to be trapped inside that barrier with a damned fallen tyrant. If they wanted to be sure of the result, there was no better way.
I'll be going, then come down in a few seconds.
Instead of summoning the dark wing, Sunny simply turned into a shadow, slid over the edge of the battlement, and swiftly glided down the surface of the wall. In a moment, he was already on the ground, emerging from the darkness with the jade giant whittling through the air. By the time Dale landed behind him, using some sort of rope memory, half a dozen abominations were already bleeding on the ground. The defenders on that section of the wall had already received orders to support their sortie. As well, shifting their fire to help the Ascended create a corridor through the mass of nightmare creature. Granted, they were spread too thin between the devouring cloud and the abominations attacking the wall in a desperate attempt to escape from the swarm, so the results were modest. At least Sunny didn't have to worry about catching a tungsten round with his back. Sunny and Dale rushed forward. Fighting their way through the tide of frenzied nightmare creatures, the stalwart master used his heater shield and heavy flanged mace to crush and break the abominations. Flinging their bodies out of the way, Sunny simply cut through them, rendering the hideous body with the jade blade of the sin of solace. Thinking, goddamn, it was great. However, there were just too many enemies to kill, even if Dale's plate armor easily shrugged off blow after blow. And Sunny could simply ignore most of the attacks that got through his defenses. The weight of the horde threatened to push them back. More than that, they were constantly accosted by the brood beasts from above, making it much harder to remain alive. For now, they hadn't met a creature powerful enough to be a lethal threat, which was a testament to how incredibly durable both masters were. But it was only a matter of time. Sunny growled, and then called upon the shadows. Instantly, dark hands rose from the ground, grabbing the abominations and either throwing them aside, or outright tearing their bodies to pieces. Black chains whipped in the air, obliterating lunging brood beasts.
If you've a good memory or two, use them now.
Dale bashed a leaping abomination with his shield, turning its body into bloody paste, and tore something off his belt. In the next moment, there was a blinding flash, and then a sound akin to the roar of an angry dragon shook the world. Sunny smelled the carnage before he witnessed it. In front of them, a morbid path of charred corpses cut through the horde. Dale pushed Sunny forward and lunged into the momentary rift in the mass of nightmare creatures.
That one has to accumulate charges for a long time. We won't be able to use it against the Tyrant.
Sunny snarled as he ran.
We need to find the damned bastard first. Don't hold back.
A few minutes of frenzied slaughter later, battered but alive, they reached the edge of the cliff and plunged down. Sunny had turned into a shadow once again, while Dale utilized an enchanted rope with a vicious hook tied to its end. The hook had been ruthlessly thrust into the flesh of an especially massive nightmare creature just a second before. Down on the stone beach, there were much fewer abominations. Some of them had already been cleaned to the bone by the brood beasts, while others were alive and full of murderous fury. Some distance away, Sunny could see the tall walls of the port fortress and the shapes of gargantuan ships resting on the waves. As he looked around in search of their prey, something flew from the darkness, forcing him to jump aside. It turned out to be a massive chunk of bleeding flesh that had been the torso of a nightmare creature seemingly only moments ago. Looking at where the chunk of flesh came from, Sunny witnessed a chilling sight. Out there ahead of them, halfway to the dark water, a towering being besieged by a mob of abominations. 6 segmented legs, a tail with a long stinger, torn and broken leathery wings, and 3 terrifying circular maws swaying on the ends of long necks. As he watched, one of the monstrosity's maws shot down, biting into the body of a powerful nightmare creature, with a violent twist. The creature came undone, rivers of blood and viscera spilling onto the cold stones. At the same time, the other 2 maws shredded a couple more abominations, swallowing large chunks of them whole. The tail stinger shot forward with blinding speed, piercing another and pumping poison into its convulsing body. Sunny gazed at the macabre scene with dark resentment.
Careful of what you wish for, I guess.
They had discovered the Tyrant of the devouring cloud. As Sunny watched, the Tyrant tore apart several more abominations, devouring their flesh with its 3 enormous maws. This creature, it was on par with the Lord of the Dead that Sunny had faced in the catacombs below the Dark City. Back then, he was merely a sleeper. Now, he was an Ascended himself, and an abnormally powerful one at that. His loyal shadows were indisposed. but he was accompanied by Dale instead. There was no reason for this fight to be too hard. However, they had a big problem. The more nightmare creatures the Tyrant killed and devoured, the more invigorated it seemed. The ghastly injuries on its wings were already healing, and very soon, the monstrosity would be able to take flight again. Sonny couldn't allow that to happen, glancing at Dale with a grave expression. He said it was now or never. Above them, a swarm of brood beasts separated from the dark mass of the devouring cloud. Rushing down to protect their ruler, Dale nodded and silently lunged forward, closing in on the Tyrant to trap the monstrosity, and the two of them with it, inside a barrier of shimmering energy. Sonny followed, cutting down several abominations that had tried to bar their passage. However, the towering monstrosity seemed to have sensed the advancing threat, or maybe grew tired of the relentless attacks by the other nightmare creatures. It suddenly jumped, soaring high into the air, its broken wings raising a powerful gale. The Tyrant hadn't managed to stay in the air for long, at least not yet, but it succeeded in creating some distance between itself and the pursuers. Then, moving with stunning speed, it turned in the direction of the port fortress and ran. Sonny's eyes narrowed. It only took him a split second to make a decision and shout a curse of damnation.
I'll slow it down, catch up as fast as you can and set up the barrier.
With that, he left Dale behind and turned into a swift shadow, flying with terrible speed across the stone beach. Sonny pursued the Tyrant. The monstrosity barreled forward like a speeding train, its 6 legs turning countless stones into rubble and dust. Its wings were healing more and more. Close enough from the port fortress to be seen from its walls, Sonny finally overtook the monstrosity and jumped out of the shadow right in front of it. The Sin of Solace flashed, cutting one of the creature's limbs, and it toppled heavily to the ground. He barely managed to dodge the massive body, but in the next moment, the Tyrant's stinger was already shooting through the air, aimed at his heart. Sonny blocked the terrifying spiky spike with the flat of the jade giant, at the same time turning his body as heavy as he could. The impact pushed him back, his feet leaving 2 grooves in the stones. The monstrosity struggled to stand up, but a dozen jet-black hands rose from the ground, grabbing and pressing it down. Sonny let out a sharp breath of realization. 3 long necks of the Tyrant twisted like snakes. 2 maws bit into the shadow hands, tearing them apart, while the third flew towards Sonny. Staring at the repulsive fleshy circle full of razor-sharp fangs, he shuddered and realized that the thing could swallow him whole. Sonny shifted his weight and dashed aside, narrowly dodging the maw, then lashed out with the Sin of Solace, as a bloody wound appeared on the abomination's neck. A ear-splitting wail slammed into him like a hammer. The shadows he had manifested were all but gone, and the Tyrant was nowhere near being immobilized. Sonny could waste more essence creating shadow implements, maybe even encase the monstrosity and himself in a large dome, but what he really needed to do was damage its wings. Sadly, the monstrosity was fiercely determined to protect them. As shortly as Sonny tried to get closer to the abomination's wings, its stinger, 3 maws, and 5 remaining legs all came after him. He scrambled to dodge the hurricane of attacks, dancing between them like a demented acrobat. Shards of stone and wet sand rose like a cloud into the air. The Tyrant's movements were growing more frenzied and chaotic. Its mind was being assaulted by the sinister whisper of the cursed sword. The effect of the charm was going to persist, too, driving the monstrosity utterly mad as Sonny cursed it. Funnily enough, the same erratic behavior seemed to be repeating in the skies above them, where a large portion of the devouring swarm seemed to have lost a lot of its unnatural cohesion. They would only cease to be a threat to the city once both Tyrants were dead, though the massive abomination understood that there was something strange going on with its mind. As well, it tried to disengage and lowered itself to the ground, as if preparing to jump again. Only this time its wings might have been healed enough to allow the Tyrant to fly, before it could escape. However, a dome of shimmering energy suddenly appeared around them. The Tyrant jumped, slammed into the roof of the dome, and plummeted back down. Sonny shouted no. Heavily armored figure of Dale slammed into its body, a flanged mace falling down to crush another of the creature's legs. The 3 of them were now locked inside the barrier. The Tyrant wouldn't be able to escape anymore. However, the dome of energy wasn't particularly large. It barely encompassed the enormous body of the winged monstrosity and a few meters of the stone shore around it, leaving Sunny and Dale no room to maneuver. It was like being locked in a tiny cage with a very angry, starving tiger. If the tiger was the size of a small building, had 3 heads, and possessed the tail of a scorpion, and had also been driven into rabid insanity by a whispering jade sword. The tyrant wailed again, its screeching voice full of madness and fury as Sunny muttered a curse. Then, it rose from the ground, and all hell broke loose. Trapped in the small bubble of the energy barrier, the tyrant turned into a murderous hurricane, moving with speed that was surprising for such a large creature. It thrashed and spun, trying to rip the hateful humans apart. Sunny and Dale had managed to dodge or deflect the barrage of devastating attacks, for now, but avoiding being crushed by the sheer mass of the frenzied monstrosity was even harder. The barrier was just too small to move away, leaving them no choice but to try and straddle it. That hadn't been a good choice. Even on the tyrant's back, the 3 maws and the stinger could attack them freely. More than that, the abomination instantly rolled on the ground, throwing them off. Sunny barely avoided being buried under the mountain of flesh. Just a handful of seconds after Dale had erected the barrier, he felt the salty taste of blood on his tongue. Both ascended were battered and wounded, of course. The tyrant wasn't unscathed, either. 3 of its legs were gone, its body was covered with a multitude of deep cuts, and one of its necks was halfway to being severed. Better yet, the creature seemed to have surrendered to its most primal instincts. Driven into madness by the sin of solace, the bestial rage of the tyrant was terrifying. But it would have been much more dangerous to fight the monstrosity if it had retained its inhuman intellect. A smart enemy was infinitely deadlier than a senseless one. Now, all they had to do was put it down. Dale's shield was wedged into one of the tyrant's necks, and as Sunny yelled to cut off its head, he hammered its rim with his mace, as if driving a nail into wood. The heater shield sliced through the flesh of the abominations like a blade, causing a river of black blood to spill onto the stones, half deafened by the creature's shriek. Sunny manifested a wall of shadow to defend Dale from one of the remaining 2 maws, the wall broken under the monstrous assault. But by that time, the Ascended had hammered his shield one last time, and one of the tyrant's heads flew off as Sunny shouted that he was trying. After that, Sunny had to worry about himself. The wounded creature shifted, slamming him into the barrier with the looming bulk of its body. Bone weave and marble shell saved him from being turned into bloody paste, but he was trapped, crushed, and unable to breathe. What's worse, there was no escape. Well, for most people, Sunny simply dissipated into the shadow projected onto the creature's body by the shimmering barrier, and appeared on the other side of the abomination, his sword already falling to bite into its side, cursing the situation. Well, for most people, Sunny simply dissipated into the shadow projected onto the creature's body by the shimmering barrier, and appeared on the other side of the abomination, his sword already falling to bite into its side. Just like that, the dire battle continued. Sunny and Dale were one mistake away from being greatly injured or killed at every moment, but neither of them had made that mistake yet. As time went on, their enemy grew more and more frenetic. But the 2 masters only grew more effective in their attempts to butcher it. They were learning how to better hurt it with every blow, dodge, and step. Dale's armor cracked, but in return, the tyrant's stinger was shattered by the heavy flanged mace. Sunny was now bleeding from a deep cut above his left eye, but in return, one of Tyrant's maws was missing half of its fangs, using a momentary opening created by the monstrosity throwing all of its weight against the barrier. Sunny finally managed to position himself for an all-out attack. He dashed forward, turning his body light to create momentum, and slashed the Sin of Solace across the base of one of the creature's necks. The jade giant seemed to laugh as it sliced through the tough hide, steel muscles, and unbreakable bones of the tyrant, emerging from the other side of its neck in a fountain of blood. The second of the 3 maws fell to the ground. Dale received an earth-shattering blow on his shield and slid back with a low grunt. His hand trembled a little after Sunny yelled they needed one more.
The barrier won't hold for much longer. We must hurry.
Sunny didn't need to be reminded. He already felt that the shadows surrounding them were changing. The shimmering energy was growing dimmer every time the tyrant slammed into it. By now, Most of its shine was already gone, but the creature had lost most of its weapons as well. It was bleeding heavily, maimed and wounded, its speed gradually decreasing. Sonny knew not to let his guard down. These last moments were often the most deadly, both because human fighters tended to get overconfident when the victory neared, and because their enemies would often abandon all caution in one last desperate attempt to destroy the opposition and survive. Still, this had to end quickly.
Risky.
The thought flashed through his mind, but Sonny was already moving, pushing himself forward. He deflected a glancing blow from the creature's tail and slammed into the tyrant like a cannonball. Thrown off balance, the monstrosity reeled and then threw itself into a fierce retaliatory attack. Sonny managed to dodge its legs, but not its maw. He simply slashed at it with the sin of solace, feeling the flesh part before the jade blade at the same time. Creature left itself completely open to Dale. The stalwart master lunged forward, his mace suddenly igniting with a dangerous red glow, the moment it connected with the base of the tyrant's last remaining neck. The flanged head of the mace exploded with ominous light, and something thundered. Sonny saw the shape of the abomination's neck melting in the furious red light as it was torn apart. Then, for a second, he couldn't think about anything anymore, moments before it died. The tyrant managed to grab his shoulder with its maw and fling Sonny into the air. Feeling a pulse of tearing pain, he found himself flying backward away from the dying creature. His back connected with the weakened barrier and shattered it, the marble shell turning rigid from the impact. Sonny landed gracelessly a dozen meters away from the convulsing body of the tyrant, rolled for a few meters more, and came to a stop at the edge of the water. A pained groan escaped from his lips. He slowly sat up and glanced at his shoulder. The leather pauldron of the puppeteer's shroud was pierced in several places, and there were deep scratches on his skin. The tyrant's fangs, however, hadn't cut deep. The lacerations were shallow as he groaned that it hurt. He took a shaky breath and looked up. High above, the devouring cloud seemed, aimless and lost, without malevolent purpose guiding the swarm of brood beasts. They were being slowly obliterated by the city defenses. Saint and Master Jet must have finished off their tyrant. As well, Sonny glanced at Dale, who seemed rather battered, but alive by all accounts. He was supposed to feel jubilation and relief. Even though the battle wasn't over, the Irregulars had accomplished their task. Today, the First Army was going to celebrate a victory as Sonny whispered that they had won. However, Sonny didn't feel relieved. Instead, he felt cold, very, very cold and frightened.
What the hell is this feeling?
Struggling against a deep sense of unease, Sonny shivered and turned to the black waves, his hand reaching for the hilt of the sin of solace. Just as he did, the water parted and someone appeared from below it. Sonny froze, staring with wide eyes, his face paled terribly. There was a man walking out of the ocean, water flowing from his armor. He was tall, with a powerful build, his hair was dark, and his bloodless face was empty. Not a hint of emotion hiding in his hollow eyes. Instead, there was something different in them. Something vast, alien, and terrifying. The man slowly appeared from the water and took a firm step towards Sonny, looming above him like a hollow wraith. The empty stare of his glassy eyes fell down. Sonny's hand shook. Stunned, he tried to crawl back and whispered in a faint, trembling voice the name Verne.
Verne.
For a moment or two, Sonny's mind was empty. He crawled back, looking up at the familiar figure towering above him. Verne, it was Verne, there was no mistake. Or something wearing Verne's corpse, at least. His shadow was much more vast and dreadful than a human's shadow was supposed to be. The hollow gaze of the dead master pursued Sonny, his face still and unmoving like a mask. Behind him, the dark waves stirred, and more figures rose from the water, men, women, dozens of them, hundreds even. They marched forward like an army of the dead, silent and emotionless, their eyes drowning in darkness. All their shadows were wrong. The people of 1049 that Sonny had left to die. He recognized all of them, staring at the undulating surface of the ocean in horror, strangely. It was the contemptuous laugh of the cursed sword that shattered his paralysis as Sonny whispered about the terror.
Look, lost from light, your sins have come to haunt you.
Sonny shuddered, coming to his senses.
Sins, you bastard. I did everything I could to save them.
The insidious voice laughed again, then whispered, its hissing words falling like drops of poison.
Weakness is also a sin, you pitiful worm. It's the greatest sin of them all.
Sonny snarled, then rose to his feet and froze for a split second, thinking feverishly about the situation. After chasing the Tyrant, he was now behind the city. There were tall cliffs between the ocean and the northern wall of Falcon Scott, so nothing could escape the shore without being torn to shreds by the defensive armaments. Granted, most of the First Army forces were currently concentrated on the southern side of the wall, fighting against the devouring cloud. The port fortress was nearby, though, and defended by its own garrison. Bloodwave and the Awakened of the House of Night were also there, protecting the anchored ships and overseeing the loading of the refugees. 1,000 enthralled corpses weren't going to put a dent in the defenses of the port. As for the terror itself, just as that thought flashed through Sonny's mind, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There, behind the slowly advancing figures of the drowned residents of 1049, the black water seethed and boiled, releasing even more thralls, nightmare creatures. Thousands of them were rising from the waves, all moving with the same silent, harrowing dispassion. He took an involuntary step back, then steeled himself and raised the sin of solace. The terror's thralls couldn't be allowed to reach the port. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were currently there, with even more already on the ships. Thankfully, the elevator platforms leading to Falcon Scott were empty. The evacuation stopped briefly on account of the devouring cloud. The defenders of the metropolis had also spotted the new threat. Powerful beams of light fell from above, illuminating the quiet horde. An instant later, a hail of bullets was supposed to tear into it. But it didn't. The spotlights moved on, as if not noticing anything. Instead of an obliterating onslaught of heavy rounds, all that came were a few sporadic streams of rifle bullets. The armaments on the wall of the port fortress were silent, too. Sonny felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't get a chance to finish the thought about the hex. Verne suddenly disappeared. Moving with much more speed than he had been capable of as a human, Sonny shifted, trying to deflect the incoming attack. But his reaction was too slow. A devastating blow sent him flying backwards. The breath knocked out of him entirely. He crashed to the ground and rolled, feeling cold numbness spreading through his chest. He had been mistaken to assess the enemy's power based on how powerful the thralls had been before falling prey to the terror. Whatever the creature had done to them, had made them into, was much more dangerous than their former selves, as Sonny cursed it.
You are a neglectful fool, aren't you?
Struggling to inhale, Sonny gritted his teeth. Indeed, he had already known that the hexed residents were capable of showing unnatural strength. Why would the slaves be different? If anything, their change would be greater. One master, 100 or so awakened, close to 1,000 mundane soldiers, several hundreds of civilians, and thousands upon thousands of nightmare creatures, all controlled and changed by the terror. With everyone seemingly blind to their existence, the situation wasn't good. Feeling true fear for the first time in a long while, Sonny forced himself to rise once again and look at the hollow-eyed horde. Although most of the defenders seemed to be ignoring the terror's thralls, some were still firing their rifles. That meant that the creature's hex wasn't absolute. With so many residents around, it could only do so much. There was a restriction to its power, which meant that it could be defeated, as Sonny murmured that not everyone was affected. There was a restriction to its power, which meant that it could be defeated. There was a sound of metal scraping against stone behind him. Looking back, Sonny saw Dale approaching, his buckler raised and dripping with blood. His heart skipped a beat. The heavily armored master turned his head slightly. Darkness nestled in the slit of his visor. His voice sounded a little muffled as Sonny shouted for Dale to tell him if he saw them.
What are you talking about?
Sonny's heart fell, but then Dale continued.
How would I miss thousands of creatures crawling from the ocean? Of course, I see them. Question is, why are the wall armaments still silent?
More and more nightmare creatures emerged from the water, flooding the shore. Sonny found Verne and shivered, noticing that the dead master was staring at him as well.
It's the terror of 1049. The wretched thing is messing with people's minds. We need to.
The hollow horde suddenly stopped moving. Thousands of heads turned in unison, countless empty eyes all staring at a single point. Sonny, he shivered.
I guess it recognized me as well.
The horde rushed forward. Across the city to the south, the majority of the First Army forces were fighting the devouring cloud, even directionless. The gluttonous swarm still posed an existential threat to Falcon Scott. The sky was torn asunder by fire and explosions. Countless brood beasts melting in that inferno as they threw themselves against the siege capital's defenses. Somewhere further south, far away, Sky Tide was once again engaged in a dreadful battle against the corrupted Titan. Winter Beast, and yet here, on the shore of the dark ocean, a new threat appeared, one that was perhaps no less dangerous than the devouring cloud. Worst of all, no one except for two masters and a handful of disparate soldiers seemed to be aware of it. Or so Sunny had thought, the instant the hollow horde surged forward. The port fortress finally came alive. Numerous turrets turned their barrels, unleashing an onslaught of bullets at the thralls of the terror of the depths. Bright beams of light once again shone on the shore, and several rail guns thundered, cutting rifts through the horde. Arrows and magical projectiles fell down like rain. The thralls had turned out to be too potent to be obliterated by the sudden assault, but they did slow down for a moment. Sunny prepared to launch himself into the mass of enemies. But Dale suddenly pulled him back as Sunny muttered that they had finally caught a break. The stalwart master glanced at him calmly, then shook his head as Sunny demanded to know what the hell he was doing.
There's no time for that. The real foe is the terror, not its puppets. You need to go find Bloodwave, or someone from the House of Night at least. They need to find the creature and destroy it before it's too late.
Sunny blinked.
I'll stay and make sure that they don't breach the wall of the port.
There were a lot of words left unsaid, but they both understood the implication. Dale was best at stationary defense, while Sunny was swift and elusive. Their roles were decided for them by that uncomplicated reality, and there was nothing to discuss. The heavily armored master took a step forward, raising his shield and mace.
Go as sunless, don't linger.
Sunny opened his mouth, then closed it without saying anything, throwing one last glance at the figure of Verne, who was walking steadily through the hellish barrage of bullets without paying them any attention. He gritted his teeth and dove into the shadows. Behind him, the first of the thralls was already lunging at Dale, hollow eyes shining with the reflected moonlight, swiftly gliding through the darkness. He soon reached the wall of the port fortress and scaled it. Emerging from the shadows on the battlements, here, a chaotic flurry of activity was boiling. Soldiers and awakened feverishly sending rivers of bullets, arrows, and magic into the horde of thralls, cursing his luck. On the other side of the wall, Sunny could see a large crowd of terrified refugees filling a large courtyard below. They had come here to board one of the ships and escape the doomed siege, but got stuck in the middle of the battle instead, ignoring the grim sight. He ran across the battlement toward the citadel of the fortress. If he couldn't find what he sought there, he would proceed past the citadel toward the pier, and from there to the battleships, if need be. As Sunny ran, he looked around, hoping to see someone from the House of Night among the defenders. He got lucky sooner than he had expected. The wall of the port fortress had towers rising above it at set intervals, each serving as a bunker. As he passed through one of these bunkers, observing the complicated machinery of the rail gun housed within, he noticed a familiar figure standing near a targeting interface. Tall, handsome, with black hair that sometimes seemed inky blue. Sunny dashed toward the Nightwalker, who looked up from the terminal with a surprised expression after Sunny called his name. Sunny waved a hand, interrupting him as Neve asked what he was doing there.
Long story, are you free from the hex? Can you see the monsters?
He realized something, then looked around with a bit of confusion.
Actually, never mind. How are all of you able to see them?
Neve lingered for a moment.
Nightwalkers like me have a high affinity to guidance and revelations, the ocean and its depths, too. So, many of us were able to see through the hex. As for the rest of the garrison, they don't see anything, but they also don't need to, as long as someone provides them with the targeting data. Basically, they're shooting blindly in the direction where we point.
Sunny froze for a moment, admiring the effective crudeness of that simple solution. Then, his face darkened. On the wall outside the bunker, one of the soldiers suddenly lowered his rifle, remained motionless for a moment, then took a step forward and jumped over the parapet of the battlement. disappearing into the cold water below without a sound. No one seemed to notice his absence. Neve pointed north, toward the pier after Sunny asked where Bloodwave was.
Protecting the ships, why?
Sunny answered with urgency obvious in his voice.
This battle can't be won unless the source of the hex is destroyed, the terror of 1049. We need to find and kill it. Staying on the defensive will only allow that fiend to propagate its influence throughout the city, killing countless people and growing its army. The House of Night and your saint are our best bet.
The Nightwalker stared at him for a few moments. His tired face paled a little.
You want us to forsake the ships, dive into the ocean, and fight the terror in its territory?
Sunny simply nodded.
Exactly, and I'll dive with you, too.
Neve hesitated for a bit, then sighed.
Well, all right, follow me, then I'll take you to see my uncle.
Sunny blinked a couple of times.
That's it. I thought I would have to persuade you.
The Nightwalker gave him a strange look.
I was persuaded the instant you uttered this battle can't be won unless that terror is one of the top targets. Anyway, so, come, let's hunt the bastard down.
As Neve and Sunny made their way across the wall of the port fortress, the battle grew louder behind them. Sounds of screams rose into the night sky, and the battlements beneath them shuddered. Ignoring all of it, they rushed forward. As they ran, Neve yelled,
Have you ever even fought in the water?
Sunny spared him a tense look, remembering the harrowing journey across the dark sea and the forgotten shore, the boat that Nephi's had built from the bones of demons that didn't survive till the end.
Once.
The Nightwalker let out a nervous laugh.
How did it go?
Sunny gritted his teeth.
I am still alive, aren't I?
There wasn't much of a choice. Anyway, Neve was probably the only ascended from the House of Night inside the fortress. The rest were protecting the battleships sailing across the strait. Bloodwave was going to need all the help he could get, so Sunny had to join the hunt for the dreadful terror. Plus, he wanted to. The abominable creature deserved to die, and especially so by his hand.
It won't be easy, though.
Sunny had a couple of memories that would help perform well underwater, but he lacked experience when it came to fighting in the depths of the ocean. Worse than that, Shadow Step and Shadow Manifestation would be nearly useless there. A shadow needed a solid surface to exist, and those were hard to find where he was going. Actually, Sunny was unsure how his aspect would function underwater. Much more distressing was the fact that he didn't know much about the terror of 1049, and what the abomination was truly capable of. The fact that it relied on mind attacks and manipulation suggested a lack of physical might. But even then, such things were highly relative when it came to a corrupted creature. With the jade blade strapped safely to his back, Sunny walked over to the very edge of the pier and glanced at Neve. The Nightwalker was already clad in a light armor that seemed to be made of black seaweed and nacreous shell. A pale smile appeared on Neve's face.
Ready.
Sunny stared at the tumultuous dark wave beneath them and shook his head. Then, he jumped. The ocean grasped him in its cold embrace a moment later. Sunny almost panicked. A deluge of unpleasant memories instantly surfaced in his mind, but then discovered that he could breathe normally despite being surrounded by water. That calmed him down a little. The essence pearl had a strange effect. Sunny could breathe through his nose as if he was standing on solid ground. And there seemed to be an invisible barrier preventing the salty water from flowing up his nostrils. Additionally, the active enchantment of the charm allowed him to see clearly through the dark expanse of the ocean, as if he was wearing a diving mask. He was cold, but not terribly so. It seemed that the high element resistance of the marble shell, augmented by the shadows, was enough to protect him from freezing to death. Adding the memory of ice on top of that turned out to be overkill. Sunny dismissed the blue crystal, relieved to save some essence. Not too bad. A moment later, Neve plunged into the water beside him and swam nimbly forward and down. Sunny had learned how to swim during his wilderness survival lessons back at the academy and practiced it a few times on the forgotten shore. And yet, one glance at the scion of the House of Night made him feel embarrassed. The Nightwalker moved through the water with great speed and ease, looking like some kind of graceful aquatic creature. It almost seemed as if he was more comfortable in the water than he had been on land. Maybe he was sighing inwardly. Sonny followed. His movements might not have been as natural or graceful as Neve's, but with the frightening strength of an ascended devil and the help of the nimble Ketch, he found himself more than capable with keeping up. They dove deeper into the dark water, soon reaching the ships. Sonny felt a tremendous shadow floating silently below. A few moments before he saw it, there, in the darkness, a monstrous killer whale was waiting, watching them with its giant blue eyes. Sonny had seen Bloodwave in his bestial form once from afar, but up close, the Saint of Night was much more terrifying. The creature he had transformed into looked somewhat like a killer whale, its hide black and white, the lines of its body smooth and predatory. However, it was much, much larger than any mundane beast had any right to be. There was a patchwork of ugly scars covering its hide, and steel armor encasing its long fins. Edges sharp like blades, its enormous eyes glowed in the darkness of the ocean with blue light, full of willpower and intelligence. Even knowing that the giant killer whale was actually a human, Sonny couldn't help but feel tense in front of the great predator. Since the beginning of the siege of Falcon Scott, Bloodwave had rarely shown himself. He mostly remained underwater, protecting the anchored ships and fighting those nightmare creatures that would try to attack the city from the depths. Army Command didn't dare leave the port fortress and the vulnerable vessels without a defender. And yet, today, that was exactly what had to happen. While Sonny stared at the mighty Saint, Neve glided forward and then hovered in front of the killer whale's snout, keeping himself in place with barely noticeable movements of his arms and legs. The tall master looked tiny beside the giant creature. Sonny realized that he didn't know how to communicate with others underwater. He couldn't really speak, or even open his mouth, unless he wanted to lose the essence pearl and suffocate. There was probably a system of signs one could learn, but he hadn't done that in advance. The world was silent, not quite, actually. The ocean was full of sounds. They were just strange and muffled, reverberating through his bones as if he was hearing them with his entire body. The noise of the battle above was like a low, all-encompassing, distant roar. Sonny knew that sound was supposed to propagate very far in the water, but had no tools to distinguish and interpret what he heard. Nevertheless, the Nightwalkers seemed to possess some method of sharing information. A few moments after Neve approached Bloodwave, the killer whale shifted slightly, staring into the depths of the ocean. His pupils narrowed. Then, a strange thing happened. The eyes of the great predator remained clear and blue, but the water itself seemed suddenly tinted dark crimson around them. Sonny felt extremely uncomfortable, as if Bloodwave didn't like what was happening at all. Then, the sensation passed as swiftly as it had appeared, and the ocean was normal once again. Neve turned around and beckoned for him to come closer, struggling against the instinctual fear of large predators. Sonny swam toward the monstrous killer whale. Once he got close, there was suddenly a familiar voice in his ears.
My uncle agrees we have to kill the terror.
Sonny stared at the Nightwalker silently. Neve tilted his head a little.
You can't speak. Well, there's nothing to discuss. Anyway, all the available information about the creature was already given to us by Tyrant of White Feather. We can only attack the terror and do our best. How is your resistance against mind attacks?
Sonny made a fist and raised his thumb. He doubted that any master had better mental defenses than him. Plus, he was already inoculated against the terror's hex. The Nightwalker nodded.
Good. Taking our awakened into the depths would just mean giving the creature more puppets to control. The three of us will have to hunt alone. Once we discover the terror, Bloodwave will lead the charge, while our task will be to support him. Maybe we'll even survive. Who knows? Are you ready?
Sonny shrugged, which was an awkward thing to do underwater. Neve swam even closer to the great beast, gliding parallel to Bloodwave's back, reaching the dorsal fin that stood tall like the mast of a ship. He grabbed onto a small depression in the armor encasing it, and gestured for Sonny to do the same after Sonny told him to follow.
Great, I am going to ride a damned saint into the depths of a damned ocean.
Cursing his fate, Sonny followed the Nightwalker's example and latched himself to the killer whale's fin like some sort of hitchhiker fish. he could feel a vast, powerful heartbeat somewhere below him, and a mighty presence that was beyond all mundane senses. Neve's voice resounded once again in his ears.
Don't let go, well, unless you feel like the pressure is too great for you to handle. I don't know how deep the terror hides, and how deep you can dive. Sorry, Sunless. Y'all have to learn how to traverse the abyss fast, and on your own.
Before Sunny could think of an answer, even though he couldn't relay it, Bloodwave suddenly moved. His great body lunged forward with stunning speed, and a powerful current almost threw Sunny off the fin. He grabbed tighter to the steel armor, feeling how strange it was to be able to breathe freely despite the rushing water. Neve stretched a hand to support him, but then brought it back, seeing that there was no need.
On this is.
Riding a giant killer whale into the dark depths of the ocean was perhaps not the strangest journey Sunny had made, but it was definitely up there with the weirdest of them, especially considering that the whale was actually a saint of the great clan Knight. The whole situation would have been comically surreal if it wasn't so dreadful. A terrible enemy waited for them at the end of this journey. Bloodwave journeyed away from the shore, submerging deeper and deeper into the watery abyss. The world around them was ruthlessly cold and absolutely lightless, eerily similar to the sky below of the Chained Isles, but much more frightening. In fact, that wasn't the only similarity. The deeper they went, the more Sunny felt as if something was pressing down on him. It was as if a titanic slab of stone was weighing on his body, making it harder to move and breathe. The feeling wasn't dissimilar to the torturous force of the crushing, and thinking of that analogy made him very, very uneasy. The crushing was capable of killing even saints. After all, he tried to control his breathing.
No mundane ocean can kill a saint, and in terms of sturdiness, I am not that far from one.
Down and down they went. The deeper Bloodwave descended into the vast, boundless, dark abyss of the ocean, the more disturbed Sunny felt, and he had already been deeply uncomfortable before taking the plunge into the shallows. There was nothing but emptiness and oppressive darkness both above and below them, stretching endlessly into the unknown. Even though Sunny could see through the water, unlike how it had been in the impenetrable darkness of the cursed sea of the forgotten shore, he was still distressed. The depths of the ocean weren't a place meant for humans. They were its opposite. Coming here voluntarily was nothing but pure madness.
I might have misunderstood the Nightwalkers. They're all lunatics.
He shifted slightly and glanced at Neve, who was holding tightly to the fin of the monstrous killer whale. The currents battered them, and the pressure was slowly growing unbearable. The scion of the House of Night wasn't exactly calm, but his unease was caused by the prospect of fighting a corrupted terror, not the watery abyss itself. Strangely, Sunny's feelings were reversed. The terror of 1049 was a harrowing foe, indeed. But he had faced plenty of those. The ocean, on the other hand, was an alien, unfamiliar, and fundamentally hostile space. It was abysmal in the purest sense of the word. Grimacing, Sunny pulled himself closer to Bloodwave's fin and waited. He didn't know what exact means the saint was using to track the hidden terror. There was some pattern to his movements, but Sunny wasn't sure what it was. Sometimes it felt as though the great predator was choosing the direction at random. But one thing remained constant. They were always moving deeper into the darkness. Neve hadn't spoken to him again, but there was also no reason to. Sunny briefly considered summoning the extraordinary rock to relay his thoughts, but then discarded that idea. He had nothing useful to say, and making too much noise could attract unwanted attention. Who knew what horrors hid in the dark depths, beside the terror? At some point, he felt a coughing fit rising from somewhere in his lungs and nearly panicked. The last thing Sunny wanted was to drown because of the residual trauma caused by brushing against a nightmare gate. He gritted his teeth and concentrated on suppressing the cough, forgetting even his fear of the ocean in the process. That was why he almost missed the moment when the terror finally revealed itself. Hidden in the depths of the lightless abyss, an eerily beautiful creature floated in the vast and silent darkness. Feeling a slight tremor run through the enormous body of the giant killer whale and hearing its booming heartbeat change pace, Sunny looked into the distance. He shivered. From a distance, the terror looked akin to a strange, ghostly flower, a lily, perhaps, or a white lotus. Its pallid petals flowed and danced slowly in the darkness. some stretching for hundreds of meters into the empty abyss. Some swirling around the small nebulous shape hidden in their center. The sight of it was both breathtakingly beautiful and deeply terrifying. The wide ribbons of white looked both like the petals of a flower and like the long tentacles of an ethereal creature, too alien to be described with words. When they got closer, however, Sonny discovered that they were neither petals nor pale flesh. Instead, he thought that he was looking at long stretches of white, flowing cloth. He didn't know if he was right or how it even made sense, and that wasn't what Sonny was preoccupied with at the moment, either. There were other shapes surrounding the ghostly white blossom, hundreds of them. Drowned bodies surrounded it like a morbid barrier. Humans, nightmare creatures, and things he couldn't name. They floated silently around the terror, unmoving, their empty eyes staring blindly into the darkness. Some had cloth petals wrapped around them like a burial shroud. The eerie scene made him shudder. The otherworldly beauty of it all only made the visage more appalling. There was a powerful presence emanating from the mass of billowing white cloth, one of utter horror and malice. Sonny felt that presence overwhelm him, making it impossible to look away from the terror, but also unbearable to witness it. He felt mesmerized, frozen, and paralyzed. That feeling was broken by another presence, though, suddenly. The darkness around them seemed to become tinted red, and he felt a deep fury rising from within him. Sonny recognized that fury as something that wasn't his own, but instead belonged to someone else. Bloodwave, the Saint of Night, was incensed, and whatever fear they might have felt was washed away by the murderous rage of the great predator. It almost seemed as though the cloth petals trembled slightly. In the next moment, the hundreds of drowned creatures all came alive, their hollow eyes turning to stare at them. Sonny uttered a silent curse and freed the sin of solace from its makeshift scabbard with his free hand. He felt Bloodwave's body move. And then a furious roar spread through the water like a fearless battle cry. The force of it was almost physical in nature, moving through the dark abyss like a devastating shockwave. After Sonny muttered, "Here we go," the monstrous killer whale surged forward, and with him, the ocean itself came alive. Powerful currents assaulted the pallid flower, throwing its ghastly defenders away. The crimson hue of the water became more apparent, and wherever it spread, Bloodwave seemed to gain even more speed, even more might. At the same time, the cloth petals exploded with motion, unfurling like long limbs, grabbing the thralls and throwing them forward. By Sonny's side, Neve glanced at him and outstretched a hand, a bone harpoon appearing in it. The Nightwalker smiled, indigo lights dancing in his eyes. With that, he pushed himself off the fin and shot forward with incredible speed after Sonny shouted that it was time. A moment later, Bloodwave crashed into the moving barrier of hollow-eyed thralls. The monstrous killer whale snapped its jaws, savaging several massive nightmare creatures at once. Clouds of blood and pulverized flesh escaped from his maw like a red tide. Powerful currents of crimson water swirled around his massive body, ripping even more abominations apart. A dozen thralls were destroyed when the great predator rammed through them at dreadful speed. Armored fins moved, slicing bodies like giant blades. A split second later, Bloodwave shot past the barrier of flesh, leaving devastation in his wake. He continued forward, heading for the eerie flower of white cloth that was the terror. Neve and Sonny were left behind, though their task was to deal with the thralls and prevent them from attacking the saint from behind.
How the hell do I do this?
Fighting underwater wasn't at all like fighting on land. At this depth, Sonny felt as though he was constantly being pressed down by an immeasurable weight, both from without and from within. His ascended physique and augmented strength were enough to deal with it, but he still felt a strain considerable enough to demand adjustment. It was a lot like fighting while under the effect of the crushing. More importantly, though, there was nothing to support him here, usually. A fighter's might came from being grounded. Without the ground under Sonny's feet, his blows would lack power. They would also push him away with the same force that had been exerted on the enemy, making battle flow and positioning a nightmare. So, he saw two ways to fight effectively. One was to grapple the enemy and use their own body as support, bringing combat to an extremely close range. He would be greatly disadvantaged in such a scenario due to the length of his blade. The other was to use acceleration and maneuvering to turn each of his attacks into a deadly charge. Sonny had a sinking suspicion that he would have to utilize both approaches today. Ahead of him, Neve clashed with one of the thralls. His harpoon shot forward, piercing the creature's head. The Nightwalker pushed it through all the way, then let go of the shaft, grabbed it again near the head a moment later, and tore the spear free. Then, Sonny had no more time to observe the Nightwalker. Forced to concentrate on his own enemy, a vaguely familiar abomination that resembled a grotesque mannequin of flesh lunged at him, its hollow eyes full of darkness. A menacing bone scythe cut down, threatening to split Sonny apart. He was somewhat certain that his skin would withstand the edge, but there was no point in taking the risk. The Sin of Solace moved to intercept the strike, much slower than he was used to, but still viciously fast. The jade blade easily cut through the scythe, breaking it, and then continued forward to sever the flesh mannequin from shoulder to thigh. The spell whispered into his ear, its voice unaffected by the heavy mass of water. "You've slain a fallen monster. Your shadow." No time to listen to it. Sonny suppressed his revulsion and used the bleeding remains of the abomination to launch himself sideways. A moment later, a chitinous body barreled through the spot he had been occupying. 5 more were already closing in on him from 5 different directions. Sonny took a deep breath. The situation was dire, but not as hopeless as he had expected. The greatest threat, the terror itself, was currently preoccupied with Bloodwave, the thralls. Meanwhile, were numerous and much more powerful than they had the right to be. However, there was one factor working against them. Most of the thralls were no more native to the dark abyss of the ocean than he was, as Sonny muttered that it wasn't too bad. Most of the thralls were no more native to the dark abyss of the ocean than he was. Their movements were purposeful, but a little bit awkward. Their initial assault was dreadful, but mostly because many had been launched forward by the long pieces of white cloth that swirled around and trailed behind the terror, behaving like the tentacles of a giant monster. Now that their momentum was spent, the thralls were much slower and less maneuverable than Neve, and Sonny, too, thanks to the nimble catch. An awakened would have been torn to pieces in an instant, but the 2 masters found themselves at a certain advantage. More than that, Sonny realized that his aspect wasn't as useless underwater as he had thought. There were no shadows around him to manifest, but that was only because he couldn't compel living shadows to obey him. Of those, there were plenty. Shadows required a surface to exist, and each thrall's body was a surface. Each of the thralls possessed a shadow, which allowed Sonny to sense their movements even if he didn't see them. It also allowed Sonny to use Shadow Step, as long as the abomination was large enough. As 5 thralls lunged at him, Sonny swam forward, dodged the claws of an especially large nightmare creature, and dove into its shadow, appearing on top of the chitinous monstrosity that had missed him a few moments earlier. The Sin of Solace plunged through the thick carapace, instantly killing the abomination. "You've slain a fallen beast. Your shadow." Sonny almost grinned. He pushed himself off the convulsing carcass, narrowly escaping the cloud of blood, and looked up just in time to see Neve clashing with another thrall. The bone harpoon once again struck first, beheading the hollow-eyed creature as Sonny murmured about the fragments. The bone harpoon once again struck first, beheading the hollow-eyed creature. However, this time, the Nightwalker was a split second too late to dodge the incoming attack. Even though the thrall had lost its head, the creature's tail still flew forward, carried by momentum and inertia. The long, vicious spike at the end of the tail struck Neve square in the chest, easily piercing the nacreous shell armor and plunging deep into his body. Then, it emerged from his back. Sonny's eyes widened, but then, something strange happened. The Scion of the House of Night seemed to ignore the terrible wound, and in fact, there was no wound instead. It was as though Neve's body had turned into liquid. The spike pierced that liquid and then flew out of the master's side without leaving a trace. A second later, Neve turned solid once again, already attacking the next thrall. His movements were swift, graceful, and flowing. Sonny tore his gaze away and lashed out with the Sin of Solace to deflect a blow from a hollow-eyed thrall. Behind them, Bloodwave had finally reached the beautiful, harrowing white blossom, as Sonny muttered that it was neat. The monstrous killer whale cut through the crimson darkness, descending upon the ethereal blossom of flowing white cloth. His mouth opened, revealing a palisade of terrifying fangs. His blue eyes had turned deep red, glowing like spotlights and full of murderous intent. As the great predator approached, the pallid flower exploded with movement. The shorter petals swirled, creating a barrier of white cloth around the small, unclear shape hidden in their center. The longer ones, which had been drifting gracefully on the currents, suddenly contracted and shot forward like tentacles. Bloodwave roared, powerful currents surrounding his body churned. Surging forward to meet the petals, he dodged nimbly, continuing to move forward as his jaw closed on one of the white tentacles. There was no blood, no torn flesh, and no crushed bone. It was as though the petal was indeed nothing but white silk. And damaging it was like cutting a piece of lifeless cloth. Sonny didn't see much of what happened after, because he had his own problems to worry about. There were just too many thralls around him, all powerful enough to pose a serious threat, even with most of them assaulting the port fortress somewhere far away and above. The Terror's drowned guard was enough to kill him and Neve 10 times over, if they weren't careful enough, propelling himself forward through the dark water. Sonny collided with a hideous creature made of iron and bone. The sin of Solace passed through the abomination's body, cleaving it apart. However, the next thrall was already upon him, 2 human hands wrapped around his throat, trying to rip it open with dreadful strength. Sonny's skin turned hard as stone and resisted the pale fingers, but he still found himself being strangled. Using shadow sense to perceive the shape of the enemy, Sonny slashed back with the jade sword. Severing both of the arms, cursing the situation, 2 human hands wrapped around his throat, trying to rip it open with dreadful strength. Sonny's skin turned hard as stone and resisted the pale fingers, but he still found himself being strangled. Using shadow sense to perceive the shape of the enemy, Sonny slashed back with the jade sword, severing both of the arms, tearing the cold hands off. He twisted and kicked back, pushing himself and the thrall away from each other. His adversary was hindered and maimed, but not eliminated, and more were already closing in. He was doing well, for now, but death was only one mistake away. Sonny relied on his superior speed and maneuverability to slay the thralls, which meant that the moment he was immobilized or stalled, the tables would be turned. He wasn't a stranger to fighting with everything on the line, but not in an environment as strange and unfamiliar as the depths of the ocean. It was far easier to make a fatal mistake in a place the rules of which he didn't know, as Sonny muttered that it wasn't going to work. It was far easier to make a fatal mistake in a place the rules of which he didn't know. Sonny willed himself to swim forward, then hesitantly turned onto his back and looked in the direction where Neve was battling a throng of abominations. The Nightwalker moved with ease and graceful precision, navigating the dark waters like a creature born in and for the depths. He certainly knew the rules. An idea slowly formed in Sonny's mind. He adjusted his battle strategy in order to always keep Neve in his sight, earning a few shallow scrapes as a result. Sonny was a talented fighter, possessing combat intelligence on par with the best of the best. He had plenty of insight into the underlying laws of conflict, and much better than that. His mastery of shadow dance allowed him to read most of his opponents like an open book, and that was exactly what he had been doing throughout this battle. Like most of the battles of the Antarctica campaign, there were too many thralls around to truly grasp all of their patterns, but their rudimentary battle styles were also crude and unsophisticated. Sensing the movements of their shadows for a few moments was enough to gain a shallow, but sufficient level of understanding. However, that approach might have been the wrong one today, so instead of trying to shadow his enemies, Sonny concentrated his will on trying to shadow his ally. Neve's battle style was much more complex, profound, and refined in terms of scope and sophistication. It was up there with the most intricately designed combat art Sonny had witnessed. As expected of a scion of a great clan, that style wasn't something that he could learn in mere seconds, or even several minutes. But even the few minor insights Sonny did gain were already enough to qualitatively change his performance. The lessons he learned from using shadow dance to study how the Nightwalker moved weren't anything grand, but they were extremely valuable. What better teacher could there be than a man supposedly carrying the lineage of Storm God, the god of the depths? It was all about how his body related to the water, and how the water related to his body. How to position himself to cut through it unimpeded, and how to use the mass of water for his advantage as Sonny realized how to do it. It was all about how his body related to the water, and how the water related to his body. How to position himself to cut through it unimpeded, and how to use the mass of water for his advantage. Shadow dance. and the harsh training Sonny had put himself through to master its first steps made both his mind and body extremely malleable and adaptable. That was why he was able to quickly put what he had just learned into practice, changing minute details of how he moved, which muscles he strained, and the timing of sending targeted impulses of essence to reinforce them. Sonny was suddenly able to navigate the dark abyss much more freely. He felt more in control of his environment, now, working with it instead of against it to achieve his goals. A massive nightmare creature lunged at him, its claws missing the target by a few centimeters. Just as Sonny had planned, he cut into the abomination and at the same time circled around it, using the carcass to hide from the next enemy. A moment later, the second thrall was dead, too. But then, there was even more Sonny could do by fusing his unique abilities with what he had learned from Neve, using the feather of truth to make himself lighter or heavier. He could float up or plummet deeper like a stone. Using Shadow Step, he could jump between the large abominations. He could even turn incorporeal and cling to their bodies as a shadow. If he used all of this smartly, the ocean wouldn't be as inhospitable as Sonny murmured good. If he used all of this smartly, the ocean wouldn't be as inhospitable. In fact, it was even a little liberating. Being able to freely move in 3 dimensions instead of just 2 opened up all kinds of neat tricks he could pull. The only limit was his intellect, cunning, and imagination. Brandishing the sin of solace, Sonny cut through the dark water to meet the attacking thralls. A pale smile appeared on his face as he told the bastards to get ready. Sonny and Neve fought against the drowned guardians of the Terror, while Bloodwave assaulted the eerie flower of white cloth itself. From what Sonny could see, and he rarely got the chance to glance in that direction, embroiled in a furious and lethally dangerous battle of his own, the corrupted creature and the saint were at an impasse of sorts. The Terror didn't seem to have a lot of physical power. His graceful petals possessed a harrowing strength, of course, but not enough to threaten the transcendent in his bestial form. Not all saint transformations were those of beasts, and out of the ones that were, not all possessed overwhelming physical might, but Bloodwave certainly did. The monstrous killer whale attacked again and again, and the pallid blossom avoided his teeth and fangs again and again. Its shorter petals danced, making the Terror glide away, moving in irrational and mesmerizing patterns. The sight of it was eerily beautiful. Its longer petals, though, some of them hundreds of meters long, slithered through the crimson darkness like white tentacles, battering the great predator and trying to wrap themselves around his enormous body. Nevertheless, Bloodwave didn't seem hindered. A few of them were already torn apart, swathes of billowing white cloth drifting silently into the dark depths, some distance away from the 2 clashing giants. Sonny and Neve were feverishly battling the legion of hollow-eyed thralls. The cold abyss was littered with blooming clouds of blood and sliced remnants that floated around them like a morbid veil. Almost 100 abominations had already been slain, but twice as many still remained. The Nightwalker was a good partner in this battle, perhaps even the best Sonny could have hoped for, and yet, he still missed his shadows. Granted. Neither would have been of much help in the depths of the ocean. Stone Knights weren't exactly the best divers, and neither were horses. As far as he knew, Sonny, meanwhile, had grown somewhat confident about fighting underwater. He had managed to learn a few things by observing Neve, and understood how to deal with the unbearable pressure by borrowing from his experiences with the crushing. Cursing the situation, Sonny, meanwhile, had grown somewhat confident about fighting underwater. He had managed to learn a few things by observing Neve, and understood how to deal with the unbearable pressure by borrowing from his experiences with the crushing. Everything was going well. Sonny decapitated another thrall, then spun, bringing the sin of solace in front of him. A creature that had been hidden by a cloud of blood suddenly lunged forward, only to impale itself on the jade giant. He had sensed its shadow long before the abomination appeared in view. His lungs were burning, which was a concerning thing when one was deep below the surface of the ocean. However, Sonny knew that it was just a sign of physical exertion. The Essence Pearl was still supplying him with a steady stream of air to breathe, and although he felt tired, that tiredness was nowhere near being debilitating. With every kill they made, the number of thralls attacking Sonny and Neve diminished. They had already survived the assault of the full 300. so fighting against the remaining two was much more manageable, and it would only grow more manageable soon.
So why do I feel so uneasy?
Sonny shivered, allowing himself to drift down for a brief moment. Indeed, despite the fact that they seemed to be prevailing, his heart was growing heavier with each kill. It didn't make any logical sense, but nevertheless, Sonny's intuition seemed to be telling him that he was missing something. But what? There wasn't much time to think between the clashes with the abominable thralls, mostly because Sonny had to spend that time observing the dark waters around him and frantically calculating how and where to move in order to survive, as well as put himself in position for the next attack. And yet, the longer the battle went on, the more it felt as though something wasn't right. He would have said that it was too easy. But it wasn't. Fighting hundreds of menacing thralls underwater was one of the hardest and most demanding battles he had the misfortune of going through in the southern quadrant. Sonny wasn't only pushing his limits, he had ventured well past them, going so far as to learn an entirely new dimension of combat. Even then, it was barely enough to keep him alive. Perhaps it was the fact that the terror of 1049 had yet to launch a devastating mental assault on them, or pull some other diabolical trick as Sonny asked what it was. Perhaps it was the fact that the terror of 1049 had yet to launch a devastating mental assault on them, or pull some other diabolical trick. Not that it wasn't already doing more than enough. In fact, the powers that the pallid blossom wielded were truly harrowing. It was controlling thousands of thralls that laid siege to the port, spreading its hex through the garrison of the fortress and the First Army soldiers manning the northern section of the wall, puppeteering hundreds of abominations that sought to kill Sonny and Neve, and fighting a powerful saint, all at the same time. It was just that Sonny had expected something more. The bitter defeat he had suffered at 1049 left a mark on his heart, although he didn't want to admit it. The truth of the matter was that Sonny was afraid of the terror. Was that fear irrational?
The marble shell gives me high protection against mental attacks. It's currently an ascended attribute, one rank below the terror, but it's also augmented by my shadows. Bloodwave and Neve, I don't know what tools they've to defend their minds, but anyone from a great clan has to have a great arsenal of memories at their disposal.
Maybe the truth was just that simple. The three of them were too tough to be affected by the terror's greatest weapon. As he dispatched another thrall and briefly met Neve, the two of them grasping hands to propel each other in different directions. The Sin of Solace sighed. Sonny grimaced, raising the Jade Giant to meet another enemy as the Sin of Solace sighed that he was a fool. He had grown accustomed to the cursed sword striking at all his deepest insecurities. The lack of education and intelligence, mostly emotional, being one of them. However, why had the Sin of Solace spoken now? The three of them being highly resistant to the terror's most powerful means of attack, and before that, about how many things the creature was doing at the same time, from fighting Bloodwave to controlling the assault on the port fortress. He continued to slay one thrall after another, becoming more and more distracted by the feeling of impending doom. His intuition was almost screaming now as Sonny asked what he had been thinking about. He continued to slay one thrall after another, becoming more and more distracted by the feeling of impending doom. His intuition was almost screaming now.
I don't get it, damn.
Sonny tore through a group of abominations, gritting his teeth. Luckily, there were much fewer of them left, so he had some space to think. Because of that, a random thought found its way into his mind. Then, he froze, which almost cost him an eye. Dale and the other defenders of Falcon Scott must have obliterated a lot of the thralls on the shore by now, as Sonny wondered how Dale was doing. Dale and the other defenders of Falcon Scott must have obliterated a lot of the thralls on the shore by now, and here in the depths of the ocean, Sonny and Neve had killed their share as well, and the terror, which had been spread thin, controlling all of them, was freed from the burden of commanding the thralls. With each of its puppets the humans destroyed, the creature was gaining back the ability to concentrate all its powers into a single point. Suddenly chilled to the bone, Sonny turned around to see the battle between the terror and the saint, but he was a few moments too late. Some distance away, the ethereal flower suddenly swirled, its beautiful petals billowing outward like a current of white silk. Ghostly tentacles of flowing cloth shot toward the charging saint, too swift and insidious to dodge. As Sunny watched in fear, Bloodwave's head became enveloped by the silk, his glowing eyes disappearing from view. The body of the monstrous killer whale shuddered, moved weakly, and then grew strangely still. He saw something much more frightening. As well, two of the longer petals were already flying through the dark abyss, approaching Sunny and Neve. They were fast, too fast, inescapable. As Sunny cursed the gods, two of the longer petals were already flying through the dark abyss, approaching Sunny and Neve. They were fast, too fast, inescapable. He had no time to dodge or even react. There were no thralls close enough to hide in their shadow, and not enough time to try and swim away. All Sunny managed to do was slash forward with the Sin of Solace. The jade blade met the white petal, cutting through the cloth. A small piece of it drifted away, but the petal wasn't slowed down at all. It seemed to unfurl into a vast expanse of billowing silk, surrounding Sunny from all sides. Then, he was wrapped in the cold whiteness, encompassed and immobilized by it. The feeling of smooth satin brushing against his naked skin made Sunny shudder. Then, the world grew still. The dark abyss of the ocean disappeared, replaced by an eternity of fluttering white cloth. As Sunny cursed, the dark abyss of the ocean disappeared, replaced by an eternity of fluttering white cloth. His exhaustion and fear disappeared, too. His memory, foresight, awareness, intent, and resolve were gone. His mind was empty. Sunny vaguely remembered having thoughts, desires, and hopes, but those words seemed senseless now, their meaning unfathomable, in fact. The word he had used to describe himself, Sunny, was meaningless, too. What a strange one it was. Surrounded by billowing silk, he sensed movement. There were shadows moving around him. He was moving, too, being drawn closer to the largest one with each passing moment. His sense of self was dissolving more and more. Soon, it would be gone completely, and then something new, something old, something darker, something waiting was going to take its place. He felt at peace with that. He felt empty. The emptiness was comforting. There was just one thing blemishing the peaceful white flawlessness of the empty satin world. A sinister, mocking voice. It whispered into his ear, gloating.
Here we go, a pathetic end for a pathetic fool.
Spurred by the hateful voice, his own voice, Sunny suddenly remembered, lost from light. That was his name. That one memory unlocked all the rest like a key. He struggled against the white cloth enveloping his body, but it was hopeless. The terrifying understanding flooded his mind, making him remember what had happened, and what was happening, what was probably about to happen. As Sunny asked what was going on, what was probably about to happen. Sunny's consciousness was strangely split, one part of it sensing the reality of being dragged through the mass of water by one of the terror's petals, the other still lost in the endless expanse of billowing silk. He could feel a boundless alien presence encroaching upon both, seeing through his eyes, thinking his thoughts, and hungrily wanting for more. Its progress was slow and labored, but inevitable. Sunny tried to fight against the harrowing invader, throwing all of his willpower into a fierce assault, but it simply shattered against the vast, ancient, malevolent enormity of it like glass. His thoughts were slowing down, suspecting that fighting the terror in the mindscape was a futile endeavor. Sunny tried to free himself from the physical bonds instead. However, his arms were pressed tightly against his body, and the white cloth refused to part before the blade of the Sin of Solace. Like the flesh of other nightmare creatures usually did, he wasn't going to cut through it while only being able to move his wrist a tiny bit. As Sunny muttered that it wasn't good, suspecting that fighting the terror in the mindscape was a futile endeavor. Sunny tried to free himself from the physical bonds instead. However, his arms were pressed tightly against his body, and the white cloth refused to part before the blade of the Sin of Solace. Like the flesh of other nightmare creatures usually did, he wasn't going to cut through it while only being able to move his wrist a tiny bit. Sunny could vaguely sense the shadows of Neve and Bloodwave some distance away from him. It seemed that he was the only one trying to struggle against the terror's petals. Both were probably still mesmerized. Why was he not, then? The Sin of Solace and possessing a true name might have helped, but it couldn't have been the only reason. Bloodwave was the enigmatic saint's true name, as well, and yet the monstrous killer whale was motionless, silently drifting on the currents in the dreadful embrace of white silk. As Sunny cursed it, the Sin of Solace and possessing a true name might have helped, but it couldn't have been the only reason. Bloodwave was the enigmatic saint's true name, as well, and yet the monstrous killer whale was motionless, silently drifting on the currents in the dreadful embrace of white silk. Which meant that this small degree of awareness was probably the result of Sonny's unreasonably high resistance to mental attacks. Even though he now shared his head with the terror, a part of his mind was still fighting against it. What good was it, though, since Sonny could neither free himself nor stop the creature from replacing his very self? As he was drawn closer and closer to the beautiful blossom of white silk, he could feel himself growing, insubstantial, with each moment. His thoughts became less his own. His eyes stared at the silken veil, moving on their own, as if something else was looking through them. Finally, Sonny felt true horror. He had been scared before, but never like this. Sensing something else take possession of his body, while utterly helpless to resist the slow dissolution of his will. It was the realization of all his deepest, most guarded fears, and it was being done by the terror of 1049, the hateful, abominable creature that had already defeated him once. Full of dark resentment, Sonny gritted his teeth and summoned two memories. That much he could still do, at least. One was a small lantern cut out of obsidian. The other was a fearsome mask of black lacquered wood with vicious fangs and 3 sharp, twisting horns, Weaver's mask. Sonny hadn't called upon it in a long time. It frightened him, as well, almost as much as the terror. Trying not to think about what he was about to do, Sonny activated the single enchantment of the shadow lantern, commanding it to devour all light around it. There was no light to devour in the dark abyss, but that wasn't what he wanted. What he really wanted was for the divine memory to gobble up as much of his essence as it could. The shadow lantern burned through most of the essence Sonny had in the time it took the white tendril of silk to bring him to the pallid blossom. There was very little of it left, now. Sonny felt like his mind was almost gone, struggling to wrestle control of his face from the terrifying presence. He forced himself to grin. He wanted that smile to be menacing, but all it ended up being was weak and scared. He sensed a vast shadow that was full of harrowing wrongness looming close, and thought it was a pity. You wanted to see through my eyes? Well, then, look. With that, Sonny reached into Weaver's mask and activated its second enchantment. Sonny had never even thought about using that deadly enchantment after the first time. Back then, moments before falling into the sky below, he had activated it out of sheer desperation. His gamble had paid off, but it almost cost him his life. Where is my eye? Allowed the wearer of the mask to gaze upon the tapestry of fate in all its harrowing glory. The endless, beautiful eternity of twisting threads transfixed all existence, stretching infinitely in every direction, as well as into the past, present, and future. It connected everyone and everything like an inconceivable, unknowable web. Weaver might have been capable of witnessing the great tapestry, but mere mortals like Sonny weren't. A single moment of looking at fate had almost caused his mind to collapse. If his essence hadn't run out after that single moment, he would certainly have been killed. His head exploding in the most violent fashion. Luckily, he had gotten off easy by only experiencing unimaginable pain and pure agony, the memory of which still made him shudder. The terror was very welcome to try doing the same, as the last of Sonny's essence was disappearing, causing him to experience painful backlash. The inconceivable sight of the great tapestry of fate superimposed itself through and above the world. It was as stunning, breathtaking, and utterly overwhelming as he had remembered. However, funnily enough, Sonny saw the beautiful threads differently this time. To him, they seemed like nothing but chains now. Granted, he didn't linger trying to look, only catching a small glimpse of the cosmic tapestry. Prepared for what was to come, Sonny used a little, but rather devious trick. His consciousness was still split between reality and the illusion of the endless expanse of billowing white silk that the terror had created to mesmerize its prey. So, Sonny made himself blind to the actual world, concentrating entirely on the illusory realm of pure whiteness. That was why the terror, who had almost stolen his body and was now looking upon the world through his eyes, was the only one to gaze upon the harrowing infinity. Sonny felt the white silk enveloping him quiver, as if the pallid blossom was convulsing, even though his head was full of splitting pain because of that one short glimpse of the strings of fate. His weak smile finally turned into a real grin. A split second later, his essence ran dry, and the deadly enchantment deactivated. The tapestry of fate disappeared, and Sonny suddenly found himself freed from the alien presence devouring his mind, or rather, it was still there. But now stunned and writhing in pain, the physical binding of white silk that wrapped his body had come a little loose, as well after Sonny told it to look well. The physical binding of white silk that wrapped his body had come a little loose, as well, not wasting a single moment. Sonny used that slack to thrust his hand forward. The tip of the sin of solace pierced the wall of the cloth prison, and then moved upward, cutting a vertical rift in it. A second later, he sliced the white petal open and burst into the dark water, incredibly happy to be in the oppressive embrace of the dark ocean once again. Sonny hastily studied his surroundings, knowing that he didn't have much time. Witnessing the tapestry of fate hadn't killed him as an awakened monster, so he doubted that it would kill a corrupted terror. If that was truly what the dreadful flower of silk was, in any case, the creature would most likely not stay stunned for too long. Currently, the pallid blossom seemed to be seizing, its petals contorting in grotesque convulsions. The graceful harmony of their eerily beautiful dance had been broken, replaced instead by chaotic and jittery movements devoid of any logic. The thralls appeared to be pained and disoriented. 2. Looking at the agony consuming the abominable creature, Sonny became even more convinced that fate was something that only gods were meant to see, or maybe no one at all. If even a corrupted abomination of great and terrible power was reduced to a convulsing mess, what hope did mere humans have of withstanding the sight of eternity? Shrugging off his own pain, Sonny glanced briefly at Neve and Bloodwave. They seemed to be showing signs of life, but hadn't even begun trying to free themselves yet. Chances were, the terror would come to its senses before they ever could. He had to finish the battle himself. Gripping the hilt of the sin of solace, Sonny propelled himself forward. He fought against the weakness that had been left behind by draining all of his essence, pushing his body through the water as fast as he could. The nimble catch had turned into a useless piece of net, its active enchantment silent. Luckily, the enchantment of the essence pearl was a passive one, so he could still breathe. His muscles and his lungs were burning by the time he reached the white flower. It had only been a dozen seconds or so, but the convulsions of the billowing petals were already growing weaker. Feeling cold terror grasp his heart, Sonny gritted his teeth and dove into the mass of white silk. His goal was the small shape hidden in the center of the petals, swimming between the dancing swathes of white cloth. Sonny couldn't shake the feeling that he would be caught again at any moment, that his mind would be devoured, and his will would be replaced by something alien and vile. Nevertheless, he pushed forward, after an eternity of fear. He finally reached the heart of the pallid blossom, and there, he saw. Sonny froze for a moment. In front of him was a shape wrapped in white silk. He could see the vague contours of a human body, desiccated and short in stature. It was feminine and small, almost delicate, pressed tightly against the wrappings. A hint of a face could be discerned. 2 hollow pits where eyes should have been, and a larger one of a mouth that seemed to be open in a silent, eternal scream. A cold understanding suddenly dawned on him. Looking at the expanse of white cloth extending from the wrapped body, he realized that what he had thought to be a flower wasn't a flower at all. It was simply a great burial shroud of white silk, its sleeves and draping drifting in the cold, dark water. Sonny lingered only for a split second, then grabbed onto the desiccated body, coming face to face with it, and drove his sword through its heart. A strange, sorrowful sensation overwhelmed him for a moment. Then, the white cloth around Sonny suddenly exploded with frenetic motion, and soon grew still. In the silence that followed, the spell whispered solemnly into his ear. "You've slain a corrupted terror." The voice of the spell resounded in the boundless darkness of the ocean, making Sonny shudder. "You've slain a corrupted terror, Sibyl of the fallen grace." Your shadow grows stronger as the veiled body drifted down, wreathed in billowing white silk. One last whisper brushed against his ears. "You've received a memory." The terror was falling down, deeper and deeper into the cold abyss. Sonny spared one last glance at the pallid blossom of the great burial shroud, knowing that it would be consumed forever by the dark depths soon. Then, he turned away and tiredly pushed himself in the opposite direction. Sonny wasn't in great shape. His mind was slowly recovering from the dreadful mental assault. But his head was in the throes of a splitting headache thanks to catching the smallest glimpse of the tapestry of fate. His body felt weak and feverish, still suffering from the backlash of draining all of his essence. There were the remnants of the trauma caused by touching a nightmare gate. As well, Sonny felt like he was about to cough his lungs out. Holding it back wasn't an easy task. And yet, a hint of dark, somber glee still managed to overcome the cold numbness that encompassed his battered mind.
I did it, and I killed that vile thing.
In the end, he ended the terror with his own hands. The stain of their disastrous first meeting hadn't been erased, but his failure at 1049 was vindicated now, somewhat, or rather, it would be if he managed to return to the surface alive, which, looking at the dark expanse of the ocean around him, Sonny wasn't sure that he would be able to do. The terror, Sibyl of the fallen grace, was dead and drifting lifelessly into the lightless depths. However, its thralls hadn't perished with their master. They seemed directionless and sapped of power, but there were still almost 100 of them left, in his current state, and especially without the active enchantment of the nimble catch. Sonny didn't count his chances against the creatures as high. A dark grimace contorted his pale face as he spat a curse. In his current state, and especially without the active enchantment of the nimble catch, Sonny didn't count his chances against the creatures as high. A dark grimace contorted his pale face. Even knowing that it wouldn't be enough, Sonny dismissed Weaver's mask and the shadow lantern. A tiny stream of essence fell into the arid desert of his drained soul, and was instantly consumed by his body. The feeling of weakness diminished a little, but not nearly enough to change the situation. The thralls were already coming to their senses, their hollow eyes peering through the mass of dark water at Sonny, Bloodwave, and Neve. Some had begun moving in their direction, full of murderous intent as Sonny cried out that he needed essence. The thralls were already coming to their senses, their hollow eyes peering through the mass of dark water at Sonny, Bloodwave, and Neve. Some had begun moving in their direction, full of murderous intent. Sonny glanced at his companions, hoping against all hope to see them up and about. Neve was still stunned, drifting listlessly on the currents as Sonny asked about Bloodwave and Neve. Neve was still stunned, drifting listlessly on the currents. The saint, however. As Sonny watched, the monstrous killer whale flinched, then jerked his head sideways. The span of white cloth still wrapped around it slid off, revealing the great beast's glowing blue eyes. For a moment, they seemed disoriented, but then sharp intelligence shone through the fog of confusion, obliterating it. An indignant growl escaped from Bloodwave's mouth as he gazed at the drowning remains of the terror and the approaching swarm of the liberated thralls. The saint lingered for a moment, then moved his giant body and shielded Sonny from the enemies with its bulky mass. The enormous jaws snapped, pulverizing the fastest of the approaching nightmare creatures. Then, the killer whale surged forward to meet the rest of them. In the next couple of minutes, a one-sided massacre took place in the dark depths. Sonny realized in the first few seconds that his participation wasn't required. Instead of getting in the way, he swam closer to Neve, grabbed him, and dragged both of them further away from the boiling battlefield.
As sunless.
The Nightwalker's voice sounded weak in his mind, but he was conscious. At least, Sonny nodded, then turned the two of them so that Neve could see his uncle obliterating the thralls. After a few seconds of silence, he heard the Nightwalker's voice again. Sonny thought for a moment, then dragged his finger across his throat when Neve asked about the terror. The two of them watched silently as Bloodwave tore the 100 abominations to shreds. Watching a saint in action was a sobering experience, to say the least. Sonny shuddered at the thought of having to battle someone like that directly, and yet the terror of 1049 had dealt with the fearsome transcendent, only to end up being dealt with by Sonny. So, as Neve said, good, and yet the terror of 1049 had dealt with the fearsome transcendent, only to end up being dealt with by Sonny. So, Sonny was all but certain that Mordred had already killed a saint. However, knowing how diabolical that fiend was, that clash might not have been a direct battle, either. On the other hand, Sonny could easily imagine the Prince of Nothing doing exactly that and crushing a transcendent in a straightforward fight. Somehow, in order to terrify the rest of his enemies and break their wills, as Sonny told himself not to get a big head. On the other hand, Sonny could easily imagine the Prince of Nothing doing exactly that and crushing a transcendent in a straightforward fight. Somehow, In order to terrify the rest of his enemies and break their wills, would Sonny be able to do the same?
I've no reason to find out.
He had no desire to kill saints. If anything, Sonny wanted to have more of them around. The more, the merrier. The position of the First Army in eastern Antarctica was much better than here, in this godforsaken hell, and the Second Army was already on its way. However, the chain of nightmares was far from being over. Who knew what would happen in the coming months? It had taken Bloodwave no more than 2 minutes to annihilate the thralls. Sonny had thought that the Saint would rest for a bit after having to fight a corrupted terror and its minions, but the great predator didn't waste any time, returning to where Sonny and Neve were floating. He studied the two masters with one of his giant glowing eyes, then shifted slightly. The tall fin that they had ridden into the depths was now right in front of them. Sonny helped Neve find a handhold, then tiredly clutched the steel armor himself. The pallid shape of the slain terror had long ago disappeared from view, devoured by the lightless depths. The mangled corpses of the thralls still drifted around them, slowly being carried away by the currents. Ignoring them, the giant killer whale bellowed and surged forward as Sonny said it was time to go back. Ignoring them, the giant killer whale bellowed and surged forward. This time, he was moving up. On the way back, Sonny couldn't help but retreat inside himself. He didn't know what was happening on the surface, whether the port fortress still stood, whether the devouring cloud had breached the walls of the city. The very idea of a world outside of the cold, dark, muted, oppressive abyss of the ocean seemed strange and distant. Chances were, he would have to fight again as soon as Bloodwave delivered them under the walls of Falcon Scott. However, Sonny was too tired, both physically and mentally, to care. He just wanted to forget about everything and rest, at least for a short while. Luckily, the killer whale seemed to be moving much slower as they ascended from the depths. That, most likely, was done for the benefit of Sonny and Neve. Even though they were masters, they were still fundamentally humans. Neither would have died from the decompression sickness, but it could do a lot of damage to their already strained and battered bodies. Actually, Sonny wasn't sure if he was even susceptible to the bends, considering how strange and tenacious his blood was. However, he welcomed the short moment of respite, somber and unchanging. The dark ocean remained the same as they retreated from its cold depths. The only difference Sonny could feel was the slow, gradual lessening of the pressure that weighed on him like a slab of stone with each minute. His body seemed to become a little lighter, and breathing was a little easier. He closed his eyes, allowing the cold currents to carry him.
There was a memory. I should probably study it before we return to the battlefield.
Sonny was in no shape to fight, but he might have no choice but to join the battle soon. He had to use any advantage there. He summoned the runes and watched as they shimmered in the darkness, slowly forming into coherent shapes. Before turning his attention to the memories, he briefly checked the list of shadows. Both Saint and Nightmare seemed to be alive, relieved. Sonny let out a mental sigh and looked up. A new set of runes appeared at the end of the list of his memories. Memory, Shroud of Graceless Dusk. He lingered for a moment. That was the second memory in his arsenal named after a burial garb. Was the spell trying to insinuate something? Too apathetic to care, Sonny shrugged and continued to read. Memory rank, Transcendent, Memory tier, 6, Memory type, Armor. He closed his eyes again. For a moment, a transcendent memory of the 6th tier was the strongest he had ever received after slaying an enemy. Of course, it was, since Sibyl of the Fallen Grace was the strongest enemy he had ever slain. There was the spawn of the vile thieving bird, as well. But Sonny didn't really consider that victory a true, honestly earned kill. In any case, the Shroud of Graceless Dusk had to be an extremely potent memory. And it was an armor, too, something that he desperately lacked at the moment. Somewhat encouraged, he opened his eyes and looked back at the runes. Memory description. Sibyls were the heralds of the gods and conduits of divine grace. Many mysteries were known to them, and so were many truths. There was one being, though, who knew much more, the graceless caitiff, demon of dread. He knew every truth there was, because he knew everyone's fear, even that of the gods, as Sonny muttered that he was lucky. Memory description. Sibyls were the heralds of the gods and conduits of divine grace. Many mysteries were known to them, and so were many truths. There was one being, though, who knew much more, the graceless caitiff, demon of dread. He knew every truth there was, because he knew everyone's fear, even that of the gods. And so, seeking salvation from the end, the Sibyls abandoned the mortal realm and guided their people on a long and arduous journey. They led them far away, across the lands consumed by war. To the tomb of Ariel, there, they found solace, safety, and shelter. In time, the voices of the gods grew silent one after another, leaving behind only a vast and dreadful silence. That was how the Sibyls embraced the estuary, and that was how they fell. Sonny frowned.
That guy again.
By now, he was all but certain that the region of the dream realm where the chain of nightmares had originated, and the black pyramid hidden within, had something to do with Ariel, the demon of dread. Was the pyramid really his tomb? Then, how would a demon die, and who would build him an opulent grave? And what did the great river that allegedly flowed back in time have to do with any of that? Its estuary was mentioned in the description of the stifled scream as a place where a dreadful secret had been hidden. Was this the same estuary? Sibyls had been, apparently, some sort of oracles that received revelations from the gods. Once the gods died, those revelations obviously stopped. The timing didn't really make sense, though, because the tomb of Ariel had seemingly existed long before that. With a tired sigh, Sonny tried to ignore the myriad of questions and turned his attention to the enchantments of the graceless dusk. There were no less than 6 of them. Enchantments, blessing of mind, blessing of soul. As Sonny murmured that it was mysterious, enchantments, blessing of mind, blessing of soul, blessing of spirit, blessing of flesh, sublime silk, blessing of dusk, somewhat invigorated, he studied the descriptions. Blessing of mind enchantment description. This memory enhances one's mental acuity. Blessing of soul enchantment description. This memory enhances one's rate of passive soul essence replenishment. Blessing of spirit enchantment description. This memory enhances one's ability to endure and recover from mental fatigue. Blessing of flesh enchantment description. This memory enhances one's ability to endure and recover from physical fatigue. Sublime silk enchantment description. This memory is woven out of sublime, mystical silk. It's impervious and possesses a beautiful splendor. Blessing of dusk enchantment description. This memory carries the blessing of dusk, last Sibyl of the estuary. The wearer can establish a mental connection with another being to hear their voice and thoughts, or make their own be heard. Sonny blinked a couple of times, and then apathetically dismissed the runes. The Shroud of Graceful Dusk was an incredible memory. Indeed, its value was only increased by the fact that all but the last of its enchantments were passive, a rare case for memories of the higher ranks. The silk garment would enhance Sonny's thinking, passive essence regeneration, as well as make him tire less and recover from fatigue faster. He would also be able to communicate with other people, or maybe even creatures, telepathically, which was an incredibly valuable ability. As Sonny said, it was a jackpot. The silk garment would enhance Sonny's thinking, passive essence regeneration, as well as make him tire less and recover from fatigue faster. He would also be able to communicate with other people, or maybe even creatures, telepathically, which was an incredibly valuable ability. If there was one thing about the graceless dusk that made Sonny feel a bit regretful, it was that it didn't seem to be oriented toward battle, and instead gifted the wearer with great utility outside of it. That wasn't too strange, since there were a lot of armor-type memories like that. Still, a transcendent one, even if it was made of fabric instead of steel, wouldn't be too shabby. And he was already thinking about how to use the blessing of dusk to cause savage mental shock to people. Sonny had plenty of harrowing experiences to share through a mental link. As he thought about that, the temperature of the ocean surrounding him subtly changed. Looking up, Sonny could see dim lights through the mass of water. They were approaching the surface. Sonny crawled onto the shore and lay on the cold stones of the pebble beach for a bit, breathing heavily. It was incredibly nice to lie on solid ground again, but at the same time, his body felt heavy and cumbersome. A part of it had to do with spending some time in the depths of the ocean, and a part of it was simply because he was still tired and low on essence. He had enough sense left, at least. to let one shadow slide off his body and take a look around to make sure that there were no enemies in his immediate vicinity. There were none, at least not close by. There was only Neve, who seemed to be doing a little bit better than Sunny. The Nightwalker took a few deep breaths, then slowly sat up as Sunny cursed. There were none, at least not close by. There was only Neve, who seemed to be doing a little bit better than Sunny. The Nightwalker took a few deep breaths, then slowly sat up.
We actually made it. Gods, I really didn't expect to live through this one.
He glanced at Sunny, receiving a vague gesture of confirmation. Sunny shared the feeling. Neve grasped his shoulder for a moment, then asked with a hint of morbid curiosity in his voice.
How did you manage to kill that horror? Anyway, such a devastating mental attack, even Uncle failed to resist it.
Sunny remained motionless for a few seconds, pushed himself off the ground with a tired groan, and glanced at the Scion of Night somberly, spitting out the essence pearl. He then grimaced and said,
I guess it was just fate. That fiend was fated to die by my hand, and so fate helped me kill it.
Neve smiled weakly, then looked away. That was when a third figure rose from the water. Bloodwave walked onto the shore, his eyes glinting with shades of deep blue and indigo. Drops of water were rolling down his smooth ebony skin, contours of steel muscles clearly visible under it. The saint remained silent for a few moments, looking into the distance. Then he sighed and suddenly disappeared. A strong gale threw a scattering of pebbles into the air, making Sunny cover his face with his hand as Sunny said he never took Neve for a fatalist. The saint remained silent for a few moments, looking into the distance. Then he sighed and suddenly disappeared. A strong gale threw a scattering of pebbles into the air, making Sunny cover his face with his hand.
What and what's that speed?
He lowered his hand and looked in the direction where Bloodwave had dashed. Slowly, his face grew still. Neve's voice sounded defeated as Sunny whispered no. The shore around them was empty. Here and there, a few dead nightmare creatures lay on the ground, their blood steaming in the cold. Snowflakes were dancing in the air as they fell from the empty sky. There were no brood beasts in sight, and the roar of the distant cannonade was much quieter than it had been when they left. All good signs, however. The illusion of peace was destroyed when one saw the port fortress that loomed some distance away. A large section of its wall was torn asunder and collapsed, and most of the lights that had illuminated the battlements were now dark. There was movement in the breach, silhouettes who looked like people walking between the rubble with unsteady steps. Beyond that, Sunny could see nothing else. Remembering the sight of the vast crowd of frightened refugees cowering in the courtyard, he felt his heart turn cold. The battle was over, at least. Otherwise, Bloodwave would have already been rampaging among the remaining abominations. The ships anchored near the fortress were intact. As well, whatever damage had been done to the port didn't reach them. Sunny stood up with a stagger, then dismissed the essence pearl and the nimble catch. Black threads surrounded his body, soon turning into the gray fabric of the puppeteer's shroud. Glancing at the crestfallen Nightwalker, he said evenly,
Let's go.
The two of them slowly made their way to the fortress. As they approached, more details became visible. The bodies of the thralls littered the ground, mangled and torn apart. There were much more of them here than there had been protecting the Terror. Thousands of them, all slain despite their dreadful power. It seemed that the defenders of the fort hadn't surrendered even a single meter of the approach without making the abominations pay a steep price. Sunny saw nightmare creatures of all kinds among the felled thralls, some of them large enough to make him shiver. There were human bodies among them. As well, the former residents of 1049, who had finally found their final resting place thousands of kilometers away from the distant research base. Perhaps they would have been glad to lay on solid ground again. As well, instead of floating endlessly in the lightless abyss of the ocean. When Sunny and Neve walked closer to the breached wall of the fortress, they saw the bodies of the First Army soldiers among the dead thralls. 2 mundane humans, awakened. There were too many of them to count. Sunny felt a bitter feeling grasp his heart. This was a part of his victory as well. He had been proud, gleeful, and elated after killing the hateful, corrupted Terror, happy to receive a powerful memory, however. His victory was made possible because most of the creature's drowned guard had been drawn away by the defenders of the port, while Sunny was fighting the Sibyl in the depths of the ocean. These men and women were dying here on the shore to give him a fighting chance. That didn't diminish his accomplishment. However, it did put it in perspective. Cruelly so. Suddenly, Sonny remembered something Master Jet had told him once, years ago, while driving him to the gates of the academy. No one can survive in the dream realm alone.
The waking world, it's no different from the dream realm these days, is it?
Maybe it never had been, passing between the soldiers that were walking among the bodies, recovering the dead humans and hopelessly searching for wounded survivors. Sonny climbed the rubble to enter the breach and looked at the courtyard of the fortress that was revealed behind it. The refugees were alive, pressed against the opposite wall of the yard and pale with terror. There was a light barricade built to shield them from any potential enemy, with soldiers vigilantly standing guard behind it. The battle seemed to have been the most fearsome just beyond the breach. An actual mountain of corpses was piled up where the defenders had made a desperate last stand, refusing to let the thralls reach the civilians. Sonny descended into the courtyard and looked around forlornly. He found Verne's body soon. The enthralled master was laying on his back, staring at the sky with empty, glassy eyes. His ribcage, shoulder, and skull were crushed by some devastating blunt weapon. He was finally, and mercifully, truly dead. Dale was laying nearby, too. Sonny almost failed to recognize the irregular captain without his bulky armor. The memories, of course, had disappeared after the owner's death, and because the body was terribly mangled. However, the insignia of an ascendant of the First Army could still be discerned on the bloodied sleeve of his bodysuit. Gritting his teeth, Sonny took a few steps forward and kneeled near the mangled body. He didn't really know what to do. The wind was picking up, making his shiver. Sonny remained silent for a while, and then said quietly,
"You rest well now, Master Dale, you did well. Your nightmare is over."
The second week of the siege was over. A few days ago, the devouring cloud had been eliminated. The terror of 1049 had been slain on the same day. As well, more people had been evacuated. More people were being evacuated. Still, the siege capital still stood, firmly in human hands and mostly unbroken. Sonny was in a familiar office in the underground government complex, the same one where he had met the rest of the irregular officers before the siege started. The office was much the same, with only the image projected on the false window changed. It was still showing the view of the city, only now there were fewer people on the streets. The blizzard was picking up again, too, so the visibility wasn't great. There was also one more vacant chair. There were currently only 3 people inside: Sonny, Jet, and Winter. The 3 of them weren't enough for the large room, so it felt painfully empty. Winter's eyes were hidden behind her sunglasses. This was the first time Sonny saw her after the day of the battle with the devouring cloud. He hesitated for a while, then forced himself to say,
"Dale, he was a good man."
She turned her head slightly and stared at him for a while. Probably, Sonny couldn't really see where she was looking. Eventually, Winter sighed and briefly touched her forearm, where an edge of a tattoo could be seen peeking out from beneath the rolled sleeve of her bodysuit.
It's all right. I knew that the fool was going to get himself killed. Eventually, there were 6 of us at the start, you know.
She grew quiet for a bit, then shook her head. Back at the academy, then, there were only 2 of us left after the second nightmare, and now there's just me. I'll probably be dead soon, too. No regrets, though, as long as it's for a good cause. Her voice sounded as laid back as usual, but Sonny could sense a bit of strain in it. Winter smiled as Sonny said he was sorry.
If you are really sorry, little devil, make sure to stay alive. You are too young and light to die. Reaper, you too. You too try to stay alive, not that you are young and cute.
Master Jet laughed.
Well, if you insist, I'll have to give it a try. Might be a bit problematic, though.
They remained silent for a few moments, enjoying the relaxed atmosphere. All 3 had been fighting with very little rest in between combat shifts for the past few days, so this meeting was a bit of a reprieve, if nothing else. Soul Reaper sighed and glanced at her datapad.
I'll update you on the current state of things. Most of the information has been sent to your communicators, so take a look at it later. The important stuff is, the wall is still holding, but just barely. 3 breaches have turned into 5. As you must know, Army Command expects that we won't lose control of the defensive barrier unless something catastrophic happens, though.
Winter raised a hand, interrupting her.
What's the point of talking about it? Let's just get to the actual business. The priority targets. Hey, 2 out of 5 are dealt with. Sunny killed the terror, while the brood mommy and brood daddy of the devouring cloud were done in by you. Sunny and Mongrel, that's great news. And what about the other 3, though?
Master Jet lingered for a bit.
Actually, that's why I called you in today. The Heart of Darkness seems to have disappeared, so we don't have to worry about it yet. Maybe that thing won't reach Falcon Scott before we retreat. Goliath, on the other hand, was supposed to show up yesterday. He has been moving very slowly recently, however, for whatever reason, so the time window changed. We should expect the big bastard to arrive tomorrow, or the day after that.
An uncomfortable silence settled in the underground office. Winter broke it by whistling.
Speaking of something catastrophic happening, are you sure we can handle a Titan?
Soul Reaper lingered for a while.
Don't fret, Sunny and I will handle him. Saint Bloodwave agreed to come out of the water to assist, too, if we need him. He's not as powerful on land, but a transcendent is a transcendent. Overall, it seems like the situation isn't entirely hopeless. The First Army has suffered heavy casualties in the past 2 weeks. True, but no more than Army Command expected. The evacuation is also only a little bit behind schedule. I'd say that as long as Tyrant continues to keep the winter beast at bay, we have a real chance of pulling this off.
Sunny shifted in his seat. Master Jet gave him a long look and thought before answering. Her voice was a bit wistful after Sunny asked how she was doing.
Well, Skytide is doing fine. Whitefeather lost a lot of people during the battle with the devouring cloud, but her husband and immediate family survived. Roan will be out of commission for a couple more weeks. Sadly, coincidentally, the House of Night lost many awakened on the same day. As well, the forces of the great clans here are diminished, but they still pack a bite. Their heavy hitters are all alive.
Sunny let out a sigh of relief. He had been somewhat worried about Saint Tyrus and Master Roan. It was good to hear that both of them were fine. Soul Reaper yawned, then put her datapad on the table and gave him a poignant look.
Back to Goliath, though, how is that project of yours coming along?
He stared at her for a moment or two.
That depends. Have you gotten those memories I requested?
Jet winced.
No, there are a lot of sleepers that need to be armed, and a lot of memories being lost every shift, with people carrying them dying before having a chance to transfer anything. I'll be able to receive a few in a couple of days, but we probably don't have that long.
Sunny sighed, then gave her a bitter smile.
Fine, the project is all but finished. I have a few spare memories as an emergency replacement. It's just that I would have preferred not to waste them.
Winter gave them both a curious look.
Are you two talking in code? What project? What memories? You guys aren't trying to buy a boat on the black market and sail into the sunset together, are you?
Soul Reaper grinned.
Just a little something Sunny has cooked up in that devious head of his to solve our Titan problem. I'll tell you if we have some free time today.
She glanced at the clock, the smile disappearing from her face.
That said, you should go get to it. Sunny, don't linger. Army Command has been known to make wrong estimations before.
He nodded, then stood up and spared the 2 women one last glance. They were probably not going to see each other again until Goliath showed up, and maybe never again after. He remained silent for a moment, then smiled.
We don't need to buy a boat on the black market. By the way, my Rhino is a fully amphibious vehicle, so it can take us over the strait no problem, as long as nothing swallows it on the way, of course. Anyway, if something happens, you are both invited, so.
With that, he winked and hurriedly left the office. Once Sunny was outside, however, his smile disappeared and was replaced by an expression of focused concentration.
This is it, then, no more time to waste.